and then the really difficult decisions that we had to make as a city in the aftermath of that. And I think it's worth just revisiting very quickly. I think that the council, our leadership team and their staff, and certainly finance and budget staff, really did a commendable job of working through those difficulties. You recall we didn't dip into and drain any of our reserves to balance the budget in those difficult times. We significantly reduced staffing. I think it was about overall around a 12% general fund reduction just during those couple of difficult years, and there's some trend information overall that shows declining staffing in relation to growing population going back almost 10 years now. And I would just clarify that does not include some of the prior fund accounting adjustments we made in the budgets that actually shifted some general fund stuff out to other funds. That was prior to that significant drop. And the council made some, they were really leading decisions in the region as far as trying to tackle some of the systemic or the structural deficit drivers. We restructured our pension plan, one of the first places to institute a Tier 2 program, and a lot of our staffing strategy was really both around containment and around containing long-range costs. So those were the bad times. So now we're in good times, relatively good times, in the sense that our revenues are rising. The state of our economy is much better here in the near term. But when we were talking about this, we know that you as council members have to be thinking, okay, well, the bad times didn't last forever, the good times don't last forever. What does the future hold? And what are the implications of the budget decisions you both make on the annual budget here, and then when you look at even the 5-year capital plan over the 5 years? What's the future? There's a downturn in the future. We still have specific forecasts that project rising pension cost burdens to the employer side of the equation, growing into the future, and OPEB, or healthcare and other pension benefits, pension-related benefits that will be on the rise. And then we always have the implications if we get into difficulty or downturn of are we back in this position of having to cut staff, and both the difficulty of doing that sort of thing and the trauma. So we don't want to pretend like we're short-sighted as a staff here in our recommendations, but I do think that we have to acknowledge that there are some inherent tensions in the budget that are reflected in our recommendations, and they are really not so much just by drip. I want to make it clear, by our thought that we are in good times and let's spend money, as much as it is we're a budget that is responding to the demands of the council and the community. And for the most part, what we've focused on are funding items that are based on responsiveness. In many respects, the hyper-responsiveness that is the expectation of our community, and I think in our organization, of responding to requests and issues and concerns, desire for really high-quality services, investment in our capital facilities, all of those things. So responsiveness. There are new planning initiatives and demands, and repairs in many ways to our existing planning, land use policies and structures. You all spent 4.5 hours last night dealing with a small parcel just in the downtown, and I think that's indicative of not only how much is at stake, but how demanding the decisions-making process is in our city. And so this budget tries to respond to that level of demand. High expectations across the board from the community, and new sort of, in a sense, reshaping a lot of the plans and policies for the city and how the city's going to look. Third, the infrastructure initiative that the council has been working on. You've been, in a very positive, piecemeal way, making investments where we could in recent years, even in the difficulties. We started to begin to work on our street repair program, even in very difficult fiscal budget years. But now we've got, as you are well aware, our almost $130 million infrastructure plan with the funding. Again, we need to be sure that we're in a position to try to put the attention to deliver those projects, et cetera. And then all of those things, I would say, this isn't a refined, it's a refined word, I guess, in a sense, or a highfalutin word, but it's not really a refined metaphor or description. But in many ways, there's a kind of Palo Alto renaissance that is taking place, that you have been rebuilding the capital plan of the city. Some folks in our community can still be saying, well, why hasn't the city fixed this or fixed that? I've actually asked our staff. I'm hard-pressed to think that there would be any other 8 to 10 year period in the city's history, maybe the beginning of the city, when there's been so much attention on reinvesting in the capital side of the city, in improving and expanding services. We're having discussions about we're almost having to balance the tensions of demands for the city to get more involved in the human service side of issues. And I don't think that we can neglect the fact that it's not just in our city, in our whole society, that the rise of hyper-connectedness and social media has escalated the level of citizen expectation on what we do and how we perform. We'll do this later, but we had a little ELT meeting this morning just looking very quickly at what we're doing in the Office of Emergency Services that did not exist 3 or 4 years ago in the city. And how much progress we've made in our emergency preparedness. But that's one of many, many examples of this is not a community, and these budgets are not budgets that reflect a kind of static status quo that's just trying to build in some inflation and a minimal amount of population growth. I think we need to acknowledge that the demand side curve is, in my view, is escalating faster even than our positive revenues are. So I don't think it will be just as simple as just sort of thinking about, okay, wait, how do we reconcile the cost and the revenue and cost side of things? It really is not a question of just balancing the budget. It's really a question about balancing the council and the community expectations with the resources that we have, and that has been the intent of how we designed this budget. So with that, I will turn it over to our capable financial staff.
Thank you, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening, Vice Mayor Schmidt, members of the council, Lalo Perez, Chief Financial Officer. I just have a couple of things to add before we have Walter get into the nuts and bolts and the items that you probably want to really get into. A suggestion for the chair. In the past, the committee has used what we term the parking lot. And the parking lot, for those of you that have not gone through it, is basically a vehicle for us to put items that you're not ready to make a decision. So the rule that you have used in the past that we suggest you consider is that if 2 committee members decide that an item needs to have further discussion or consideration after you deliberate through all the hearings, then it goes in the parking lot. So it's your call as a committee how you decide what goes into the parking lot. That was just one way that we've done it in the past.
Yeah, it's been helpful if there's a controversial issue that has spending on it. Maybe you want to park them and then look across and balance with revenues available against what's in the parking lot. So I'd ask my colleagues.
I think it's a good idea.
In favor of that.
I think it's policy, isn't it?
You could adjust it, it's your call, whichever way you
I
want.
think you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
Okay,
So we'll move
so
ahead.
we'll move ahead on that direction. The other point of comment for you is that we will keep track of any changes. So obviously, we have a starting balance that we're recommending to you. So it comes from the city manager's proposed budget, it gets to you now, and then you start making adjustments as you make your motions. We will track those motions, and at the end of the hearings, or if the meeting goes too late at the beginning of the next hearing, we will recap where you're at and what changes you made, including capturing items that go into the parking lot.
See if the balance keeps going.
So getting the business side in order, let me just start with a couple of additional points to the city manager Keene said. One of the things that I think is very sound of the work that has been done over the years, and this policy has been in place for, gosh, a good 20 years probably, it's your budget stabilization reserve. So it's a key factor on how rating agencies look at us. It's a key factor on how we operate and how we have funds in case of a need, an emergency. So just to remind you, your budget stabilization reserve for the general fund is 15% of expenses. That's the floor. And the cap is 20%. And the goal has been set for quite some time at 18.5%. Strongly believe that as a result of that policy, we've been able to make recommendations, the city manager has made recommendations to you for the last 4 fiscal years, not counting this year, that have allowed us to transfer $20.5 million to infrastructure reserves. They were not planned for, but they were as a result of various points that I'm going to make in a minute as to why we had those excess revenues. And what I believe we've done right as an organization is continue to invest in our infrastructure rather than ongoing services because of the nature of the need of the infrastructure. So that's a key point that I think needs to be considered as we continue to make our decisions going forward in how we continue to invest in our infrastructure. So from our perspective, there are a couple of reasons why that occurred, that we had those excess revenues. One, obviously the economic recovery. Second, the restructuring of the expenditures that Mr. Keene talked about, the 12 to 13%. And third, including within that restructuring, was the ask of employees to contribute towards our benefits and forego some of our salaries. So those 3 reasons, I think, permitted us to put those additional funds into infrastructure. Second point related to the infrastructure that we also must be mindful of, and this is from personal experience of going through it 20 years ago, again, with the infrastructure plan that we had then, is that things are going to change. Either priorities are going to change, the cost is going to change, the order of priority are going to change. So the $126 million program, we need to keep it as a target and as a goal, but we have to understand that there could be changes and we'll need to adjust, and that adjustment could impact our operating budget and our decisions as we go forward. Third, related to that, is the bond rating. As a result of making these strong decisions and difficult decisions, we were able to get a AAA rating from S&P and Moody's for our GO bond financing. And that saved us millions of dollars as a result of having such a top rating. Very few communities can talk about having a AAA rating. In terms of dipping a little bit into the enterprise side, we have a AAA rating as well from S&P for our utilities. So we're doing the same type of fiscal management on the other side. I think the last point that you know that because you gave us that direction already is that now that we're starting to deal with infrastructure and we know that we still have more work to do, we also need to address our unfunded liabilities. And we have a discussion on that as we continue. Obviously, we'll have that discussion commencing with the budget hearing. It is on our radar, and we know the importance of how that impacts our budgets. With that, unless there's any questions, let me turn that over to Walter, so we can go ahead and start the discussion of the proposed budget.
Good. Walter?
Good evening, Walter Ross, Budget Director. I'm here with Christine Paraz at the table, who is our Principal Management Analyst, as well as my capable staff right here. Sean Shea, Michael Bruckner leaving right now, Andrew Moria, and Paul Harper. And he will be back for a long while. He's just getting a few things for us. What we want to do today, we'll discuss today with you citywide expenditures in the presentation, then go into general fund revenues and expenditures. Lastly, highlight the investments we are proposing in this budget. Before continuing with the presentation, I would like to acknowledge the artwork in this slide in the budget documents. All artwork was produced by children enrolled at the Art Center, Palo Alto Art Center, fine art camps and classes offered by our department, CSD, or Community Services Department. The citywide expenditure budget of $553 million has increased by $83 million, or 17.7%, in comparison to fiscal 2015. The significant change are due an increase in capital budget amount and salary and benefits. The major reason for the increase in the capital budget amount is a change in the capital budget process.
Is this the only place it's going to show?
Yes, that's right. It's the only key which is available. As a change for fiscal 2016 and going forward, estimated unexpended capital project funds from the current year are carried forward through the budget process. This has resulted in nearly doubling the capital improvement program budget for the capital improvement fund and enterprise funds from $53 million in fiscal 2015 to $103.7 million in this proposed budget. Please note that the estimated carry forward amounts are getting further revised as the fiscal year closes, and prior to adoption of this budget, staff intends to bring forward revisions to the carry forward amounts for various capital projects. The second major reason is an increase in salary and benefit costs. In accordance with the applicable Memorandum of Understanding and the Council-approved Management and Professional Compensation Plan, this budget includes funding for step increases for eligible staff, annual salary, pension, health care, and retiree health care cost increases, as well as the cost of adding approximately 13 full-time equivalent positions. For fiscal 2015 to fiscal 2016 proposed budget, the salary and benefits cost increased from $150 million by 8.5 or 5.7%, $158.6 million. As reported in the previous slide, the capital budget amount for the enterprise and capital improvement fund is about $103 million. Adding in the capital expenditures for the internal service funds, the total fiscal 2016 capital budget amounts to $115.1 million. During its next 2 weeks, the committee will be asked to review the city's proposed capital budget. The capital budget for the internal service funds and enterprise funds will be discussed during the presentations of the information technology, public works, and utility departments. On May 19th, we will present the capital improvement fund budget, which includes funding for streets, bike lanes, sidewalks, parks, etc. And at this time, we also expect to present the committee with the finding of the Planning and Transportation Committee that the city's capital improvement program is in compliance with the comprehensive plan. This chart, the next one, provides with an overview of position changes since the fiscal 2015 budget. In comparison to fiscal 2015, this budget proposes to add net 7.3 full-time equivalent positions. As you can see from the last column in this chart, at the time of adopting this year's budget, the city had 1,033.8 full-time equivalent positions in all funds. In October 2014, the City Council approved the outsourcing of street sweeping services, which resulted in the reduction of 7 FTEs in the refuse fund, as reflected in the enterprise fund column. As part of the approval of the fiscal 2015 mid-year budget review, the City Council added 1 principal attorney position, as shown in the general fund column. With the addition of the 13.3 positions proposed in this budget, the net increase is 7% year over year. As part of the previous slide, I mentioned the increase in citywide salary and benefit costs net to internal service funds is $8.5 million. As you can see from this breakdown, more than 50% of the year-over-year increase is for benefits costs. As shown in this chart regarding pension expenses, over the last few years, pension costs for city employees has risen. As discussed in the last 10-year general fund financial forecast, pension costs are expected to continue rising. In comparison to fiscal 2015, the fiscal 2016 budget, the city's pension contribution rate for miscellaneous employees increased by 1.6 percentage points, from 26.1% to 27.7%, and for safety employees by 2.4 percentage points, from 39.4% to 41.9%. It is important to note that these pension rates are a blended rate and include the rates for Tier 2 and Tier 3 employees. Long term, as the city hires more and more Tier 2 and Tier 3 employees, it is expected that the growth in pension rate increases will slow down. As of November 2014, 25% of the city's current full-time employees are enrolled in a Tier 2 or Tier 3 pension benefits. As shown in this slide, healthcare costs increased on the average 6.2% annually over the last 10 years. Similarly with pension plan changes, the City Council has implemented changes with healthcare benefits. Except for public safety unions, all other employee groups have agreed to a flat healthcare contribution amount. With the flat amount, employees have made more affordable healthcare choices. Before we'll discuss in detail the general fund budget, I would like to quickly speak to increases in rates for the city's utility customers. As discussed with this committee, this budget does not include any rate increases for the electric and gas utility. The rates for water increasing by 12%, for wastewater by 9%, for refuse by 9%, and for storm drain by the consumer price index of 2.7%. Additionally, the city's fiber optics customers, the rate will increase by the same CPI adjustment as contractually agreed between the city and its customers. Now turning to the general fund. As discussed by City Manager King, the fiscal 2016 proposed general fund budget is balanced. It includes $183.5 million in revenues and a $1.6 million carry-forward fiscal 2015 budget surplus. These total revenues cover the $181.1 million in expenditures. It is important to note that as of this fiscal year 2015 mid-year budget, the fiscal 2015 budget surplus is projected at $5 million. As our CFO just mentioned, per City Council policy, the budget stabilization reserve needs to be maintained between 15% of budgeted revenues expenditures, or $27.8 million, and 20% of budget expenditures, or $37 million, with a target level of 18.5% of $34.2 million. This budget projects a budget stabilization reserve by fiscal year 2016 year end at the 18.5% target level. Looking at general fund revenues estimated revenues for fiscal 2016. As part of the last general fund long-range financial forecast presented to this committee and the City Council, staff estimated all revenue streams based on detailed analysis and historical trends. As part of the development of this budget, these revenue streams were reviewed and adjusted as necessary. For instance, a slightly increased property tax based on the information received from the county assessor's office, and we decreased utility user tax for water sales due to the drought, utility user tax for telephone due to the voter-approved ballot measure. In comparison to the fiscal 2015 adopted budgets, revenues are increasing by $14.1 million, or 8.3%, from $169.4 million to $183.5 million. More than half of the increase in revenues, or $8.2 million, is attributable to increases in tax revenues. It's important to note that a third of the growth in tax revenue, about $2.9 million, is due to the voter-approved transient occupancy tax rate increase from 12% to 14%. The transient occupancy tax revenues are the fastest growing revenues for fiscal 2016 compared to the current year. In comparison to fiscal 2015, transient occupancy tax receipts are estimated to increase by about a third, or $4.6 million, from $14.2 to $18.8 million. The increase is attributable to the voter-proof tax increase, new hotels coming online, and a higher average daily room rate. Property tax revenues represent the second largest dollar increase for revenues in comparisons to the current fiscal year. Based on the latest information from the County Assessor's Office, staff estimates that property tax revenue will increase by $2.6 million, or 8.2%, from $31.9 million in the fiscal 2015 adopted budget to $34.5 million in the fiscal 2016 proposed budget. The third largest increase in revenues is for charges for services. Charges for service include a multitude of revenue streams, starting with providing services to other agencies such as fire services to Stanford University, development-related services, or golf course revenues. In comparison to fiscal 2015, charges for services is increasing by $2.4 million, or 10%, from $23.1 to $25.4 million, primarily due to the golf course being assumed open for the first 6 months of the fiscal year. As you may recall, the fiscal 2015 adopted budget assumed the closure of the golf course, which did not happen as the city did not receive the necessary regulatory permits to start the golf course reconfiguration project. Further, charges for services are increasing due to the recommendation for green building inspection fees, increased class revenues to the CSD, and the continuation of the fire service contract with Stanford University. It is important to note that this budget assumes a continuation of the Stanford fire service contract, although the current contract is set to expire in October 2015. Staff has been in negotiation with the university to continue providing fire services and is hopeful that the city and the university can come to an agreement. If a new agreement provides less revenue to the city, staff will bring forward to the council a revenue adjustment at the time of agreement approval. This chart shows the general fund expenditures by category for fiscal 2016. In comparison to fiscal 2015 adopted budget, the salary and benefits portion of the budget is reduced from 63% to 61%, primarily to the additional investments in infrastructure. This budget, as Lalo and Jim talked about, recommends an additional transfer of $5 million to the Capital Improvement Fund and $1.9 million to the Public Property Infrastructure Fund. Of the $5 million transfer to the Capital Improvement Fund, $4.7 billion will be used to address the infrastructure plan gap of $7.5 million. The remaining $0.3 million reflects the annual consumer price index increase for the transfer to the Capital Improvement Fund. Consistent with the last general fund forecast, an additional $9.4 million, $4.7 million each in fiscal 2016 and 2017 is proposed to be transferred from the general fund to the Capital Improvement Fund to support the infrastructure plan. These transfers over 2 fiscal years, which are possible due to the additional TOT receipts, will close the infrastructure plan funding gap, provide funding for the public art program related to the infrastructure plan, and fund a small reserve for cost increases. Additionally, consistent with the covenant lease agreement with the Palo Alto Unified School District, $1.9 million will be transferred to the Public Property Infrastructure Fund for capital improvements at the community center. For fiscal 2016, some of this funding will be used for master plan for the center and urgent roofing repair needs. From the fiscal 2015 adopted budget to the fiscal 2016 proposed budget, the salary and benefits cost for the general fund increased from $107 million by $5.9 million, or 5.5%, to $112.9 million. 3/4 of this increase, of $4.3 million, is due to salary and benefits increases as agreed with the city's employee groups. 1/4, $1.6 million, is related to the net addition of 10.9 positions. Next, let me turn the discussion to the increases in general fund expenditures by department. As just discussed, transfers out, if considered a department, comprises the largest increase in year-over-year due to additional investments in infrastructure. The second largest investment is proposed in the Planning and Community Environment Department, which is responsible for current planning, long-range planning, transportation, parking, and code enforcement. Due to community and council's focus on planning and transportation, parking, and code enforcement issues, this budget this budget proposes increases in positions or non-salary costs. As highlighted during the City Council budget kickoff, this budget proposes increasing library hours, mainly at the Rinconada and Mitchell Park libraries, of 32 hours or 14% per week, from 228 hours to 260 hours per week. These additional hours will require an increase of 3.3 full-time benefit positions and 1.5 part-time positions. As discussed by the City Manager, the investments included in the budget are aligned to council priorities and initiatives, as well as to support organizational efficiencies. In my presentation today, I've discussed the increased funding for infrastructure, which is primarily possible due to higher transient occupancy tax receipts. The increased funding for infrastructure will close the infrastructure plan funding gap over 2 years. In order to support the implementation of the infrastructure plan, we are also recommending to add 1 engineer position. We've discussed the increased opening of library hours, especially at the Rinconada and Mitchell Park libraries. To support the multi-layered traffic congestion mitigation plan, this budget adds 1 traffic operations position to primarily support the new traffic system, 1 parking operations lead to assist the parking manager with many parking-related initiatives. And in response to the community and the council, this budget also increases code enforcement staffing by adding 1 code enforcement lead. This budget includes some modest funding in the fire department for a community public health consultant to conduct a study regarding the health risks for our residents based on age, other demographics, and use of emergency medical services. Due to the success of special events, this budget adds 1 recreation superintendent position to assist with the day-to-day operation of the recreation division in the community service department and the coordination of special events. We are also recommending to add $45,000 for special events funding. This budget net increases staffing in the development center by 2 positions. It recommends to reduce a vacant green building planner position and outsource the work. Add 1 assistant building official and 1 planning manager. The existing planning manager position is reassigned from development services to the planning community environment department due to the increased workload in PCE, which necessitates the addition of a planning manager position in development services. Looking at organizational efficiencies recommendations, this budget includes a recommendation to add half a position of a performance auditor 2 and to reclassify an existing administrative position into a performance auditor 1. To continue investment in information technology, this budget recommends upgrading the current analog media and recording equipment in the council chambers with digital equipment and to purchase a new IT help desk and IT asset management system. Due to the increased reliance on information systems in the public safety department, including the recommended purchase of body-worn cameras and the related technology, this budget recommends adding a senior technologist position. As part of the fiscal year 2015 adopted budget, one-time funding was added in the Public Works Department for an operational study of the Facilities Management Division. The study determined that operational efficiencies and improvements can be achieved. The proposed facility management position will be tasked with implementing improvements, identifying the operational study, and provide day-to-day support over the facility management division staff. Finally, this budget recommends one-time funding for various efficiency studies and consulting support in the planning and community environments, fire, and human resources departments, a fee study for development services, and funding to implement the priority-based budgeting process. Since the 13.3 net position addition support various outcomes, funded by various funding sources and in various departments, we hope that this chart will be useful to the committee as you review the recommended position additions. Additionally, as part of today's At Places memorandum, we provided with a matrix of position additions sorted by department and 1 matrix sorted by funding source. As City Manager King stated, we have carefully evaluated all position additions in order to support community and council priorities and initiatives. This chart provides context for position changes in the general fund over the last 10 years. As included in the budget, we're recommending 10.9 positions supported by tax revenues and fees to be added in the general fund. With these additions, if approved, the general fund position count will be at 600.35 FTEs for fiscal 2016. In comparison to fiscal 2016, position count at the time was approximately 49 positions less, or approximately 8%, higher, or approximately 8% higher than today. At the same time, as the city decreased the position count in the general fund over the last 10 years, the Palo Alto population has grown by 7% from 61,700 to 66,000. Consistent with last year's budget hearings, each department director or council appointee with proposed budget changes in his or her budget will make a short presentation to the Finance Committee following the format as outlined in the table. Talking about the department overview, accomplishments, the initiatives for next fiscal year, significant budget proposals, and, if applicable, major capital projects. After each presentation, it will be the committee's turn to ask questions. As part of closing this presentation today, I would like to quickly share the budgeting schedule for the next 2 weeks as well as of today. After council questions on the overview of the budget, Molly Stump will present her department's budget, and then followed by Community Services and HR. We're scheduled to complete the Finance Committee budget hearings by Tuesday, May 19th. This concludes my presentation, and we're available for committee questions.
Let me add a couple, Vice Mayor. I have, for when we get to the end, updated calendar. There was a suggestion to add approximate times to the items which we have done. In addition, we have updated the open budget, which gives the community an opportunity to go and look at our budget for the proposed budget that we have now and 5 years of actuals going back. So that link is there. It's also on our website. And then another protocol to suggest to you, as you approve each of the budgets that you have in front of you, we suggest that you approve it in tentative approval, pending any change that you may have when you do your wrap-up at the end. So that way, if you want to reconsider something, you're on the record that it's a tentative approval. That's those are my comments.
Great. Thank you for your presentations and enough numbers to keep us busy for foreseeable future. On item 1, there is no action required by the Finance Committee, but it gives us an opportunity to ask questions on the general overview. I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks working by department, but if there are any questions that come up on revenues or an overview of the budget, it would be appropriate to ask now. Are there anything that council members want to raise?
I just want to ask a question. So
Could you turn your microphone on, please?
net citywide expenditures, including everything, in 2016 was $553.6 million,
That's correct, yes.
which looks like a 17.7% increase from last year. What are revenues?
It's balanced, so you have the same amount of revenues there as well. Our utility funds, what you have as well is you have some usage of reserves to balance out the rate increases.
Right. So how much are we taking out of reserves for the 2016 budget?
So for the general fund, we're carrying forward a budget surplus. And for utility reserves, that would be on page, I don't have it by heart.
What?
Not everything.
101?
Page 101.
Oh, wow.
You did mention that there was a reserve carry forward that is new in this budget. It shows up as revenues that did not in the past year. Is that right?
In the general fund, correct.
the
Well, that's correct. So what you have, that's correct. So what you have with the change in the capital budgeting
Yeah,
process,
that's the big.
that's a big part. You have now a beginning balance increasing because we're not using those funds for fiscal 2015, but they will be used as a source or as a revenue source for fiscal 2016. So that's the biggest change
Yeah,
actually.
that's,
It's a capital budget process change. So if you look at page 101 and 102, the total reserve usage project is 56 million, but the majority of that is for capital improvements.
Real quickly, do you mind let's just explain the rationale for why we made that change. There's a good programming and sort of open government reason for that.
Sure. So until fiscal 2015, we showed those projects in the capital budget document which had added funding, meaning new funding or change in funding, and new projects. However, through the accounting process, we carried forward about $20 million in general funds, $30 million in utility funds or so, to allow existing projects to be continued in the following fiscal year. So what we did here is, in the capital budget document, that's why it's so large this year, it doubled in size, is we are actually now showing all projects, the status of the project, and the funding source as well. So we're carrying out the funds, we're letting the funds lapse, we're not using them this fiscal year, and then we're going to reappropriate them for the budget process for the following fiscal year.
To touch base on the enterprise funds, it's part of the strategy that we can talk about it on Thursday when the utility staff is here. That's how we use the reserves and the minimums and maximums, kind of like what I talked about the general fund earlier. They have similar guidelines for the enterprise side, so we can get into the discussion as to how strategically that is used to help balance the budget or set the rates.
any follow-ups there?
I gotta parse this, so go ahead. Let me just have a quick follow-up while he parses it. So, I guess I was just looking at a broad issue. I looked at total citywide revenue by category on page 55, right? And just so I understand, in 2013 we had 477,153 in actual revenue. Is that, am I correct in understanding that? Then 458,780 in 2014, and then our adopted budget for 2015 is 465,295. We don't know the actual revenue yet because we're still, right? And then now we're proposing 486,821 is what we expect to get by total revenue, right? So first of all, what again is the big jump up that caused the 465 to the 480? That's a. When you look at the rest of the years, that's a really big jump up.
So you have $40 million in the general fund, so of that amount, so that leaves, it's still 21, the remaining will be enterprise funds.
It's in the other revenue fund is where the big jump is.
Correct, it's utility funds, because you have rate increases.
So the big increase is the utility, so it's driving that 486.
But the difference is $21 million, $14 million is the general fund, so that's 2/3.
Okay, so 14 million is the general fund.
Correct.
And what's driving the general fund there? What's the big?
Big thing, you have $8.2 million tax revenues, of which the biggest one is transit occupancy tax. That's the biggest jump.
Okay. So then I look at, and this is what confused me, I look at total citywide expense by category.
Which page, Greg?
So that would be page 57. So when I look at the actuals in 2013, I saw that we had revenue of 477 and expenses of 428. That sounded good. Then I would go from 2014, we have 458 in revenue and 456 in expenses. Then we get to adopted 2015, and we have 465 in revenue, but 470 adopted in expenses. So now we're negative 5 million.
So then what happened that we used reserves to balance the budget.
Okay, so $5 million we took out of reserves to balance the budget. But then I get to 2016, now I'm really confused. And I guess is this, so we're at 486,821 is our revenue, and yet we're spending 553. Now I'm really confused. That's like huge amounts of money.
So
$83 million.
Yeah.
That's correct. So you have, it's really the capital budget process which makes the change in the changes in total expenditures and revenues. So, and then, as mentioned just right now, is the capital budget is going from 53 million to 115 million. So you're rebudgeting the majority of those funds. So the gap here of about $60 million or so, the majority of that is just a rebudgeting of existing dollars. And that explains the majority of the reasons between the gap of 486 and 553. It's about $50 million is capital. The rest is using reserves, which you're doing in the utility funds, as we are smoothing out the rate increases. We are dipping into reserves.
So what you're really telling me is that we're not spending more than we're making.
We're not spending more than we're making.
That what we're doing is we're taking money for capital. So if you take out the capital and you take out the utility increases, where are we?
Then you have left the internal service funds, which are balanced, because they have to be. And that we are, although there are reserves too, like from the vehicle fund, we are taking down reserves for equipment replacement. In the IT fund, I couldn't tell you right now what's plus or minus. In the general fund, we're just carrying forward budget surplus of $1.6 million as a funding source for next year's budget.
Can I ask a question? So when we do the capital budget piece of this, we're going to get into a more in-depth discussion about this, because it's probably still a little bit confusing about, how we're reconciling the prior fiscal year and the new fiscal year budget, what's carrying forward these unspent funds, which in the past we were later on reappropriating after the budget process to be able to build that directly into the, so that every time we produce the capital budget and the capital improvement program, we're able to show the full cost of all of these projects sort of in more completely than we did in our old snapshots of the capital program. And it'll make sense, I think, when we get into more detail in the capital budget. There's no budget smoke and mirrors going on here right now, so we'll
Right now. But if you just look at the general,
Sorry, can you turn your microphone on, please?
sorry, if you just look at the general fund, then is it accurate to say a quick summary is we're spending $1.6 million more than we're taking in revenue, and the $1.6 million is coming from surplus from last year? Do I understand that?
That's correct. And it's balanced. The more than $1.6 million in one-time expenditures.
Yeah.
So basically it's one time to one time. It's balanced.
And I think that's the best way to look at it. Enterprise funds by themselves, general fund by themselves. Because it gets a little confusing if you combine because of the big swings within the enterprise and how we use reserves in a different manner than we typically do in the general fund.
And just as a follow-up to that, on the 1.6 million, are we using that for one-time expenses?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, just a couple quick questions. You mentioned on page 17, parking and transportation funding, $500,000. Does that show up in several different departments? Or
So, yeah, that's interesting. So it shows up in several funds. So you have the general fund portion, and you have a portion of Park University Avenue Parking Permit Fund. So for instance, the parking operations lead is 30% funded in the general fund and 70% funded in the University Avenue Parking Permit Fund. So that's why this is an all funds number, it's not a general fund number.
I guess I just have a general question. As you go department by department, it's hard to capture the funding of a particular program. It pops its head up in several different places. So when is it appropriate to talk about?
Sure. So we do it by department. So for instance, coming back to the example of the park operations lead, what we're trying to do, we present the budget to you with the detailed write-ups to tell you 30% funded in general fund and the rest is funded in other funds. So you can bring it up at any moment in time regarding position additions, and we'll make sure that your decisions is carried through into budget hearings when the fund comes up.
Where's the most appropriate place for that? Would be the planning?
At the planning, correct.
Yes, in the planning department.
Yeah, we'll have to remember to include the capital portion That's right. For planning on that night, because that would be the only one that gets a little
Yeah,
different.
good, okay, that's helpful. Now, the infrastructure spending is broken to capital, but that has an impact on our revenue, since part of our new COT revenues are dedicated. We have to think of our revenue stream, at least a portion of it, as committed.
That's correct.
I guess the Coverly funds and the TOT funds. How can we have a notion of our tax revenues without dedicated funds? How fast has that grown?
From the TOT perspective?
No, from an overall, if you were to
Yeah,
control for these dedicated
As we look
funds.
at each department,
Oh, I get it.
we think in terms of our tax revenues growing,
Uh-huh.
but part of the tax revenues are already dedicated.
Correct.
So how much is growing without the dedicated funds?
I would have to calculate that.
Yeah, that would be helpful to have.
So, Craig, can I just have a follow-up, because I have the same issue. I'd like to see a breakdown that says exactly sort of what Greg said, is that, okay, we've dedicated all of that TOT money to infrastructure, and we agreed not to lower our previous infrastructure funding in doing that, so you can't just take the money and then not use it. So I want to have that broken out and make sure that we're not spending any of the infrastructure money on any of your other items in the budget, like hiring new people, for instance.
Yeah, we can refresh the committee with a plan, so we have the starting point of the base, I'll call it. And keep in mind that the majority of the increases on the departments are going to be driven by salary and benefits, and particularly the benefit side. And so when we talk about that, we'll address that as well. How much is driven by that versus services
Yeah, it's
increments.
tricky to think through, but that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it'll be clear, again, when we get into, say, in the infrastructure issue, for example, in the capital fund, in the capital budget, in the capital program, you'll be able to show that in a pretty unfettered way. It's not commingled with operating expenses and those sorts of things per se in different departments. Because I think what I'm hearing with the council, for the most part, you want to be able to ensure that the dedicated funds clearly are dedicated to these explicit purposes. We're not even borrowing from them in the short term in any sense, so that when the project comes on, whether it's in fiscal year 16 or fiscal year 19, the funding, as we anticipated it, is there available to be spent at that point in time. We don't get caught.
Yeah, and
short.
I want also the other side of the coin, when we get to community services, we want to make sure that we take into account that our revenue is growing at a truncated rate. Our available revenues are growing.
So just to add on, Councilmember Sharif, on page 15, when you get to the capital budget document, actually you don't have to flip right now, but just for your own understanding, has a detailed discussion as well for transfers from the general fund for the last, since 2010 and going forward 2020. We put a graph in there as well. It's the capital budget, not the operating budget. Okay, so this we actually describe these funding transfers from the general fund into the capital fund.
So what page is this?
Capital budget, not operating.
So not operating. So I don't.
It's the other page.
I didn't bring the book.
Page
so.
14 and 15
Got it.
has a detailed discussion of that.
Okay.
Good night.
I got it.
We have
Okay.
3 or 4 other books for each one of you too, just in case.
Okay, if there are no other questions, let us move then on to the department budgets, number 2, council appointed officers.
So if I may, Vice Mayor Schmidt, just to point you to the places memorandum for today, I mentioned to you that we provided you a matrix of position additions by fund and by department, and then we have a few replacement pages for you. We have actually color ones for you as well, which we can point you to at the end of the meeting. We found a few errors, which happens unfortunately every year, typos, clerical errors, and so this is detailed in the memorandum for you to understand. It's minor things like citywide expenditure budget, we're off by $100,000. We actually found a slight typo, so we fixed that, as well as some replacement pages in Public Works, and in the General Benefits Fund, we had one labeling wrong.
And that's in the material handout.
And then we also have for you, which Councilmember Liz already asked for, we have tabs. which for your book, where you can actually tab, or we can do it for you as well, for the operating the budget documents, like the capital and budget documents. So if you're interested in doing this, we'll be happy to do them for you and prepare for you for next meeting.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the offer.
That brings us to item 2, council appointed officials. Do we start with the attorney?
Is that where we're starting?
Yeah, we're starting with the attorney.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair Schmidt. Molly Stump, City Attorney, committee members. I'm here with Senior Management Analyst Stacy Lavelle from my office, who is my numbers person and will help me if we get down into the weeds on some of this. So happy to be here and lead off your departmental budget discussions. We're a small department on the 8th floor of this building, but we think we punch above our weight class in terms of impact on the city's work. And so we want to talk with you just a little bit. The PowerPoint, our mission is to provide high-quality legal services to the city. And we have a piece of just about every, or contribution to make of just about every program, service, initiative that the city is involved in. We do, for budget purposes, have our small department divided into divisions, which are listed there. Administration, consultation, and advisory is really the heart of what we do, or at least our large part area. This is transactional work that we do with the city in terms of negotiating, drafting, consultation, training, risk management. And then the second major piece of what we do is litigation and dispute resolution. And this is, of course, the city's mop-up function. Sometimes things go wrong. There are disputes, and we take those on and resolve them. Sometimes we initiate disputes where the city's rights or the rights of Palo Altans need to be enforced. And then we have a last little category, which is called administrative and official duties, that has some code drafting and code enforcement type activities allocated to it. Thanks, Walter. Next. So we've just wanted to highlight a few of our accomplishments from the last term, which council members are aware of. They've seen our work on a lot of this. We have assisted the city's planning department and the city manager in initiating the residential permit parking and the business registry ordinances and programs. We did settle a major piece of litigation, resolved quite a few pieces of litigation last year, but did settle one that resulted in near full compliance with the disputed responsibility to pay housing fees into our affordable housing fund, and that did net approximately $8 million for the city's affordable housing account. We assisted the planning department in negotiating and securing certification of our housing element by the State Housing and Community Development Department. We completed agreements that transferred management and control of the airport to the city. And we did election support work that resulted in transient occupancy tax and telephone user tax ordinances going before the voters last fall, both of which were substantially supported by the electorate and did pass. Thank you. Walter? All right, so just looking ahead, we will be involved in all of the council's major initiatives in the coming year. And these, of course, include assisting with the comprehensive plan update and the other land use and transportation programs that the council is looking at. A couple are listed here. Again, residential permit parking, the implementation of that, planned community zoning work. We are also, of course, doing some work on retail preservation, growth caps, etc., the other major initiatives that council's involved in. We do a lot of work that's more routine, and we've included that on this slide in terms of the ongoing infrastructure improvements, which are really in an operational phase. They do have a legal component, which can involve contract negotiation, but more typically drafting and legal support for the documents that support that work that goes on in the field. We will be bringing to you in the next few weeks a draft wireless communications facility ordinance that complies with new federal legal requirements. And this is more included as not so much of a major initiative, but an example of the type of work that we do in terms of keeping track of evolving changes and obligations that Palo Alto needs to comply with at the federal and state level, and bringing forward appropriate programs, documents, contracts, and ordinances that protect the city in light of those changing requirements. Thanks, Walter. All right, so significant for this year, we are really in the last stages of putting in place a few structural changes that the council has wanted to see in the legal office to ensure that we are staffed at a sustainable level to support the complexity of programs and services that the city provides. And so this year we are adding, you added this in your mid-year budget, but the full funding is now identified in this annual budget for a new principal attorney position in my office. And we will also be decreasing the city attorney's contingency fund, which I believe actually sits in the city manager's budget. And these are a secondary source of funds that we tap into later in the year as we need to for outside legal services. Most of those support our work in defending the city in litigation. A smaller amount are expert technical counseling and transactional work that we need to have done that's highly specialized. Walter?
That's it?
That's it?
Yes.
Questions from the committee?
Good. Any questions on the presentation or the budget?
I would just comment how pleased I am that you have moved ahead with shoring up your legal staff, because all of us notice how hard you all work. And I think it was, I know it was talked about last year, and I'm glad that it sounds like you have acted on it, but the person isn't in place yet, am I correct?
The recruitment
We're
is
very close.
underway. We are close. And thank you very much, Councilmember Niss, for your support. That means a lot to me, but even more to all the attorneys who you may not see on a regular basis who are working away up there to support the city. So thank you.
They're
for
also pleasant, which is very, truly, I mean.
Yes, effective and decent people.
Thank
Thank you for that.
Councilmember Sharp.
So welcome. And yes, I also am really pleased that we're moving ahead on hiring. So I just wanted to understand some of these numbers. The administration cost that's going up to 150
page.
So I'm looking at the actual numbers. Page 143.
Thank you.
A budget summary. The increase, that's the principal attorney we're hiring, and then wage increases basically in the department. Is that what that is?
So I'm told that the principal attorney was allocated entirely to that category because the position isn't here and working yet. But there is no person in my office, including myself, that is all administration or even a majority administration. I'm a working lawyer, and so will this individual will also be. So once the person is here, we will allocate the substantive work, the project-based work, the legal services that person will do to the other categories, and that administration number will go down by quite a bit.
So, this is really hard to understand without. I know enough about the city attorney's office to guess that that's where the principal attorney is, but it wasn't in salary, and so I was confused. Right? So, no, or is it in salary?
It's in salary
as well?
down below.
So it's in salary as well.
Yeah, under the dollars by category salary.
Got it. Okay, so now I get it. All right, so that makes sense to me. So, all right. So what else is in here besides the principal attorney? Which is what, two?
It says the city attorney mentions portions of staff. Then you have support staff, which probably is part of the attorney's office, which Molly has. So these types of FTEs roll up into the administrative division.
Okay.
It's probably about 10% of my position, and then a large percentage of legal secretary, the management analyst.
So where does the rest of your salary go?
Primarily in consultation and advisory, and some in litigation and dispute resolution.
Okay.
Because that's most of the work that I do every day.
So,
And if I'm sorry, Councilmember Sharp, if you look at page about 143 with positions by division, it's not exact positions, but it does show you 0.47 FTEs for an administration in fiscal 2015, and then one principal attorney position is rolling into it. Page 143 at the very bottom.
So, okay, 143 at the very bottom.
So again, that will never reflect the actual amount of administrative work done in my office. It's much too large. So that person will be a working lawyer when they get here, and that one will go away.
I got that, okay.
And it will be, and the amount of positions in consultation and advisory and litigation and dispute resolution will go up.
So I guess the division part was what was throwing me. So we have different categories of division where we just break them up. How does that work? I guess I don't understand.
That's correct. So what departments do, they allocate costs to certain parts of the budget at the lower level, the division level, and this is up to the departments how they would like to do that. Now, granted, as Molly mentioned, since we weren't sure yet how to allocate the cost of this principal attorney position, we just moved it right in the administration function. But we will definitely move the costs out as the position is hired. Then we'll charge the other cost centers such as consultation, advisory, litigation, dispute resolution, and you see the actuals reflecting much more the activity of this new position.
So when you hire outside counsel, I assume that goes into litigation and dispute resolution. Is that where that goes?
That's not reflected. These are in-house.
So it's all
staff.
in-house staff.
That's correct.
So where's your budget for, outside counsel and all that? Where does that go?
That is, it is in there as well. As you see in outside by division, you see salary and non-salary costs in there. So if you have
Where's the
non-salary
non-salary?
costs, contractual costs for the attorney's office, about $340,000.
Right.
And I'm sure that this
Yeah, it's
is
not in positions, though.
No,
not
Right.
positions.
No,
it's
not
but the
positions
cost.
by division does not
No,
include
no, but
outside.
above
No.
the table.
But, okay, I misunderstood your question.
Okay, so if I relate that, I get it, to then where it says contract expenses, that's the dollars by category. That shows me the outside counsel costs.
That's correct.
Okay.
So we're trying to split it in many ways, but obviously so many ways of splitting it. Probably there's a dimension we're not getting for you.
All right. And then rents and leases that you pay rent for what does that mean?
It's our storage for our files.
Oh, storage for the files. I get it. Okay. And then, now you charge other departments for your services? Is that how that works?
Yes.
So that is.
You only charge them $26,000?
Yeah.
Molly, you have to up your charges. What is that, like 50 cents an hour?
Why don't you explain?
So the charges for services is actually fees. These are attorney fees which an applicant may have to pay. It's part of a planning process, and these are part of a fee revenue. That's that. But charges to other funds is the cost allocation plan of the internal service departments, charged to the enterprise funds, to the internal service funds, etc.
Okay, so the charges for services are actually money we take in. Charges to other funds are the internal.
That's correct.
I got it. Okay. And then other revenue is just miscellaneous stuff that you get in.
Miscellaneous, which dips and drips and drabs.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, a follow-up on that,
Yeah.
there's a dramatic decline in charge to other funds, and I noticed elsewhere, there seems to be a lot of shifting over the last year in how funds charge each other for their services.
So let me delve a little bit into cost allocation plan, if I may. So what we have done with the new budget system, we're actually much more refined in allocating costs out to other funds from internal support departments. So that's one reason why things have shifted. If you look in each department, there are some major shifts like here. The second thing is that annually, as part of development of the cost allocation plan, we contact the attorney's office and say, where have your staff time worked the last year? Have they done more work for the internal service funds, less work, more work for the enterprise funds? And based on that actual activity level, we adjust the cost allocation plan. So what you see here is the 2014 actual activity reflected. That's the reason why most likely dropped in the recuperation of dollars.
So if I want to look at this and compare it to the past, I'm going to get discontinuities because you're doing a different methodology now, and you're stating that the new methodology in 2016 is a more accurate.
We're doing the same methodology but more refined.
And I would think if we would go back over time, we could see that we have made changes in that same regard, it's not just this year.
Yeah, like the human resources, I know it's big shifts in how they charge other parts of the organization.
But this is centrally determined by us in OMB, where we allocate this cost out.
But we'll have, as we look at each department, we ought to be sensitive to the fact that you are in charge of that thing. It may have differences.
But Craig, I'm going to guess that Molly doesn't turn anyone down. Here is my cost per hour. I'm really sorry, but there's nothing we can do for you this year because we don't have any more budget. I imagine you figure out how to make it happen.
Yes, we
As a
do.
matter of fact, everybody really works as hard as possible to drive down the hourly rate to almost nothing.
Well, I hope it's the same hourly rate we got.
Oh, we have council members, I'm sure, who would be glad to step up.
There you go.
Let's see, one last little
Or not.
question. I noticed in some of the other departments, there are increases in claims for things like, they call it claims, workers' comp, insurance liability issues. Does the legal department get involved in those?
No, the city's workers' comp system is administered through the Human Resources, People Strategy and Operations Department.
Okay, and Public Works has traffic issues, and they get.
Well, there's a general liability fund also.
Yeah, that's right.
So when city workers are out in the world and as a result of their interaction, there's a citizen believes they've been injured personally or their property, they may file what's called a claim
Yeah,
against the
there's a
city.
big jump in those. Are you involved in that?
Absolutely. So we have an employee who's a claims technician who receives those, investigates them. We resolve them where we feel that it's warranted and justified. Where we determine that it is not, we deny them. And then the claimant has an opportunity, if they still disagree with that, to file a court action.
And that's part of the $613,000 to show up as a charge for service.
Yes.
Charge
Yes.
to other funds.
Yes.
Now, the new ethics panel, I know you spent some time on that. Is that charge elsewhere? Where would that show up?
You're speaking of the employee whistleblower hotline?
Yeah.
So that's a very modest amount of time. So where that comes in is when we're asked where we're spending our time, and I'm identifying a certain amount of time. It's in with what we support the auditor's office.
Can I just
I
add
don't
to
know whether
that?
there's a charge.
Let me add one other
Okay.
thing to it, that freedom of information, I mean, questions flow into the city, all kinds of areas, some of them being legal, or maybe someone needs the legal advice. How do that fit into this flow?
So we do quite a bit of work in that area. Routine requests for documents do not come to my office. But if there's any complexity about the request or question about exemption of records, there is an attorney in my office who's assigned and works very closely with the clerk's office. And then we'll give guidance in terms of what documents are responsive, and sometimes we'll review documents for exemption.
Yeah. Jim, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, I just want to be clear. So, I mean, just things like the ethics hotline, I mean, that represents a minority, a very small minority of the kind of issues or complaints we would just normally get the organization to get, the attorney's office or any of us at this level. Same thing on public records requests or whatever. And I don't mean this in a sort of smug way. When you get into these small offices where the majority of the folks are management staff and work demands are such, in one sense, it's almost pointless to try to allocate the dollars directly with what the sort of services are being provided, because almost everybody is working a lot more than the amount of dollars. I mean, these dollars are allocated as it relates to sort of a 40-hour work week. So it's the truth might be there might be 60 hours worth of work folks are doing in this area, and the dollars couldn't maybe incorporate.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to ask the question of, is this something that you notice as a big piece of your budget? Is it growing? Does it demand hours that you plan on spending elsewhere?
The ethics hotline does not. It's very, very modest. The public records work is significant. It certainly was growing for a time. I would characterize it probably as somewhat stable now, but it's a significant part of what the city does in terms of providing services to the public.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sharp?
So just as a quick follow-up, the budget should seem pretty stable to me over time, except for the part where we, hire outside counsel. And so I guess I noticed that in, 2013, 2014, our actuals were at 416. Our adopted budget was 340, which was significantly less than the 416 for 2015.
Where are we?
So if I'm looking on page 143, right?
Yes.
If you look in 2013, which are actual numbers, I'm assuming that we spent $409,000. And I'm assuming this is all outside counsel, but I suppose you could have contracted services for other things.
That's right. The vast majority would be.
But that's what I'm assuming. So if you don't mind, we'll just call it that. So I'm thinking 409, 416, and then our adopted budget for 2015 was 340. I was assuming you thought at that point that we would have less outside counsel use. So I was going to ask you, 2015 is coming to a close, fiscal year. Are we on track to spend 340, or do we expect it to be more?
So a couple of comments. You identify an area of potential volatility, but it was interesting when we were looking back at the numbers this afternoon. There is a fair amount of stability, more than I would have expected, given the small size of the city. But it's important for council members to be aware that, especially in the area of litigation, we have to respond to things that happen in the world that, in many cases, are beyond anyone's control in the city. Sometimes they are actions, disputes that result from decisions that the city does make and knowingly takes on a certain level of risk. But whether that matures and becomes an expensive dispute or not is not something that you can necessarily predict at budget time. So I appreciate that comment very much. It's useful. In terms of whether we are on track to spend that, we are. So just so the council is aware, that is, I think, the base budget reflects the base budget amount. And yes, and it's a little bit above our base budget for outside counsel. And then there is this contingency that is available. It can be returned if it's not spent.
So how much have you spent for the year?
This is the number. $373,000 to date for general fund outside counsel.
So that's pretty close to the 340.
Yes.
So you're just carrying over for the next year 340. It could be a little bit more, I suppose. So.
Yes, although this year, in consultation with the budget office, we are reducing the contingency in the expectation that the additional staffing in my office will allow us to do some more of this work in-house.
Okay, so you feel comfortable that that's a pretty good estimation, the 340 then, for outside counsel?
I do, for planning purposes, again, with the caveat that things can happen that we need to respond to, in which case, we do come back to the council. We have not done that in recent years, but a number of years back we did need to do that, and then the council responds in the mid-year.
We were pretty close last time. 373 versus 340, that's pretty good.
Yes.
So if I may add, Councilmember Sharf, the way we budget contingency is a non-departmental. That's the last item for today. The actual expenditures show up in the attorney's budget. So you always may see a lower budget amount, but a higher actual expenditure amount. This contingency is transferred in per media code. It's allowed by the city attorney to do this with approval of the city manager, and then expended at the attorney's level budget.
Right, but tell me if I'm wrong, but I assume that the plan would be to budget what we think it's going to be, and if you budgeted perfectly, you wouldn't use any contingency. And we try and be as accurate as possible.
Correct.
So one last question. The allocated charges, they're going up by 36%. I realize it's a small department, but that's a huge increase. So how does allocated charges work? What do they mean? Remind me exactly how we do this, and why is her budget going up 36%?
So there's several allocated charges. You have charges for electricity, for utilities in general, which we allocated out by FTEs in this building. We have allocated charges for IT. allocated charges for legal, which wouldn't affect the attorney's office, and allocated charges for workers' compensation, general liability. So we have a basis of allocating those out, and based on that, what is FTE or other factors, and based on that, departments get hit with those budgets, with these expenditures. But they also immediately are made whole by that. So we just take internal service fund expenditures and allocate them out by department general fund budgets and enterprise internal service fund budgets.
Okay, so
It's just
made no sense to me.
it's a how shall I put this? It's out. Well, the idea of it is that you take general workers' compensation costs, put in one fund,
Right?
and based on actual experience, you say, well, the department's the attorney's portion should be X, what is ASD's portion should be Y, to recuperate the costs for this fund.
So why, if my question then is, why is it going up 36%? What have they done to make it go up 36%?
I think that's partially this revaluation of allocation.
I think it's the water drink.
Are you drinking too much water? Using too much electricity? Not being green enough?
Let's see, Councilmember Filson, one quick question.
But I do want an answer to that
I don't know
question.
how quick we're talking about.
Okay, I can tell you. It's on page 145. My staff reminded me, so thank you.
Okay, good.
So what you have here, we actually detailed that out for you. It shows you the base budget adjustments. If you look at the fourth line down, you have general liability insurance allocated charges adjustment of $4,000, and the IT allocated charges adjustment of $21,000, and there's the reduction for printing and mail.
Okay.
General liability, when we get to this fund, we can talk about this. What we did is we funding the general liability fund based on the actuarial evaluation, and that increased the cost for all departments across the city.
Okay.
Councilmember Filson.
Okay, so thanks. So I wanted to look for a second. So I think, if you look at the top section, the total expenditures on page 143 from 2013 goes from 2.4 million to 2.56 million to 2.6 million, and then there's a $500,000 increase for this year. So it's relatively flat for the last 3 years, and then there's a $500,000 increase this year. And which I assume about half of that is probably the new principal attorney.
That's correct. The principal attorney is $283,000.
And then a big chunk of the rest is the increase in pension and retiree medical, which is about $120,000.
So if you look, Councilman Phillips, if you look at page 145, that actually details it out for you. And it shows you the salary and benefits adjustments, $197,000. Then you have the funding for the principal attorney, $283,000.
Okay. So I had a question about, if you look at on page 143, the line salary for 2016, the proposed budget is $1,650,670. And yet, if I go look on page 144, the total salary is $1,694,385. I mean, they're almost the same, but not quite. Why are they different?
Okay, so what do you have on the staffing table on page 144 is an average calculation of salaries. It's not the exact salaries for each employee.
Ah, okay. But the total should be the same, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're close.
Let me tell them.
So if I may, we have two positions that are underfilled. So for example, we have a senior deputy city attorney position where I actually hired a lower classification and less expensive employee, a deputy city attorney sitting in that position. So I believe that may be the type of thing that might cause some difference here.
It could be. The other thing is what staff is telling me is this is a new thing we started this fiscal year where we're trying within the system mapping those two tables together, and it appears that the mapping didn't work 100%. It should be the same. I agree with you, and that was at least the intent. But really, what you're approving as a budget is the budget summary. You're not approving the staffing costs.
Okay, so it's the one on 143, not the one. Okay,
That's right.
all right. Okay, so let me ask one, and I understand that the one on 144 may not be exactly correct then.
That's correct. I would go with the one on 143.
So let me ask a question about the one on 144 anyway for a moment though.
Sure.
If I look at salaries in here, the salary of the new principal attorney is $191,422.
Uh-huh.
Okay? And so if I take that and back it up, so if you see the increase in salary from 2016 of $341,490, if I back out the principal attorney's $191,422, then I get a difference, a remainder of about $150,518. Does that sound about right?
That's right.
So that's not including the principal attorney, that's the increase in salary from 2015 to 2016. I assume that's mostly wage increases.
That's correct.
So the base salary in 2015 was $1,308,732.
And may I add just one more thing there? In fiscal 2015, you have a legal fellow which is only funded for 6 months. In fiscal 2016, the legal fellow is funded for a full year.
Oh, I see.
So that's something that happened.
half
Fiscal
person.
2015, we made the funding available in the attorney's office effective January 1.
Okay.
So now we annualize the cost, which by the way we should have detailed on the base budget summary page.
I see. So of that $150,000, how much do you think was
The legal fellow was probably salary $120,000 and $60,000.
It's 95,000. It's 95,000.
95,000, perfect, thank you.
So if I go 150 minus 95, that's $55,000. So then the average wage increase, the average raise was then about 5%. Does that sound about right?
Which is
then?
about probably correct, because if you think about it, the council approved effective July 1, 2014, a 2% general salary increase for management professional staff. And then the council also approved, and then we have a pay for performance package, and it's up to the attorney's office how she raised the pay for her staff. But usually it fluctuates between 0% and 3%. But I don't know what the
So
difference
my comment is 5 as an average is a little high.
So that's, well, I'd originally calculated 11.5 for the 6 months person.
We could certainly get you the actual number.
So
We
you
have
think
also
it was
had, we also have 2 underfilled positions, one on the staff side, one on the attorney side, and we have had some vacancies during this time, so we have salary savings as well, and I don't know if that
that would be
shown
reflected
here
here
in any
because
way.
you will budget the budget.
Got it.
The other thing you will have is the attorney's increase, which you granted, I think, in December this year. That's reflected here as well. So it's also there.
I'm looking at the department averages.
I understand.
So you think that's about 4%? Between 4 and 5? You said 5 is a little high?
Yes, if it includes my position, I would estimate I could get you that number, but I would say it's somewhere between 4 and 5, perhaps 4.5.
Okay. Then I wanted to ask one other question, which is over here, and the numbers here aren't huge. I just want to understand this going forward for others. So the healthcare increase from 15 to 16 is 3.5%, and yet the average in here is 6 or 7% or something like that.
I can explain that too.
And yet the other benefits here is 16% increase, right? So how does that all work? Because I know when we get to some of the other groups, those numbers are going to be inverted.
Sure. So what happens is each employee chooses the health plan, depending what health plan package they choose, whether they do the health insurance, which is the medical stipend, a health plan stipend, which doesn't increase, for instance, whether they have an increase in family rate, or they move from a spouse, one plus spouse, or from family to single. That all has an effect. So the way we build this budget, maybe that will help you. We take a payroll snapshot in late February of the year, where we take everybody's benefit package based on new enrollment, the exact salary increase, the salary they get at the time, and then we build on a position by position basis, we build the budget. So we know the increase in health is the person's plan plus a CPI for health, which is between 4 and 8%. I explained the difference in a second too, effective the 6 months into the fiscal year. Then we look at SEIU employees, if the eligible for step increase, we budget for that. If we look at managed professional employees, we look at the approval of the managed professional plan, which says effective July 1, it's a 2.5% increase. And then there may be a pay for performance, which we average in. And that's how we build the position budget, salaries, health benefits, etc. So it's really done not just on averages, we do it on a person-by-person basis.
So if I understand what you just said, then the healthcare change from year to year varies somewhat with individual choices.
That's correct. And it may vary from department to department.
And department. So in a small group, we should expect to see considerable variation in how those change from year to year. But in a large group, they ought to trend towards the city average. Okay,
That's correct.
that's my question. Thanks.
Okay, if there are no other questions, it would be good to have a motion for
So moved.
preliminary approval.
Do you want just Molly's moved, or do you want the whole thing moved?
Whole budget? Here we go.
I'll move the city attorney's budget.
I can second that. Any discussion? All in favor?
Thank you, Councilman.
First department budget.
Thank you, City Attorney.
Taken care of. Thank you very much.
So the city clerk's budget is the next one up.
Let me just note, my colleagues, it's good to have detailed attention. We are well behind the estimated time. Okay. We are patient. We have the whole week. Okay.
So for the city clerk, the budget starts at page 158 until page 166. It's important to note there's no presentation for you here today. So Beth Miner, our city clerk, is present. The main reason is because we do not have any budget proposals for you, that base budget adjustments, like in other funds, but then no additional funding proposed for the department at this time.
Is there a
So
reason?
the city clerk didn't request any funding.
You want to repeat your question again, Beth Miner, City Clerk?
We have no proposed budget.
No changes.
We have no changes.
No changes. Okay.
Generated by the department other than the normal cost of operations, the increase in salary benefits, cost allocations.
Let me do one preemptive question. With Donna having been gone 6 months and you just stepped into the position, I imagine that amount of money simply went back into the regular fund. Am I correct?
That's correct. We had salary savings and it would go back in.
Right. Thanks.
Other council members? Councilmember Sharp.
Well, welcome to your first budget. So, since you didn't propose any increases, I guess I wanted to ask a question. We seem to have council meetings that start at, 5:30, 6 o'clock, right? Plus now we have all these finance committee meetings and all these policy and services meeting twice a week.
I hear a raise coming.
Exactly. No, and I guess the question is it seems to me that we're now having, I would say, twice as many council meetings, or council meetings including committee meetings, in which the city's clerk's office has to provide food. I am amazed that you can continue to provide stuff and not ask for a budget increase. So I guess I was going to ask you if you need a budget increase on that.
So the council meals come out of the council budget, not out of the city clerk's budget.
So it's not in your budget?
It's not in my budget. It's in council's budget.
Okay. I just wasn't sure where that was.
Which is why when we get a council budget, you see that it's negative in the whole.
No, I get it. Right, exactly. I thought that's what it might be. Got it. Okay. So, in that case, I'll just move tentative approval of the city clerk's budget.
Okay. Any further questions?
And I would have just one request that I would read into that, because I think Greg is right. I think the number of hours that we're meeting and spending in the chamber is considerably more. And this is not a demand at all, Beth, but if at some point you and David happen to have a break in your schedule, it'd be interesting to compare the number of hours we're meeting now with last year and the year before, just to get some sort of baseline.
We
Because I
can't,
am concerned about how much you all are working. I see you in there till midnight and you're back again in the morning at 7:30.
we can't get that information, and I did look just prior to coming here. This year for fiscal year 15, we are looking at 58 city council meetings that would require some type of a meal, and 16 standing committee meetings that would require a meal. And then we do have the 2 special events, the reorg meeting and the retreat, that also require food. And then there is the other stuff, the nuts, the drinks, the coffee, the tea, water, and that is included as part of that budget.
Not to mention the candy.
And the candy.
So Beth, is that 58 means you're going through the end of the year?
That's correct. I was projecting out through June.
So, just through
From
June.
July 1st of
last
2014
year.
to June 30th of this year.
That would be 58.
Correct.
And another 16 standing committees.
Correct.
And another couple of events. So as I said, I'd like to see that compared with year before that.
We can provide that.
Thank you. I know you can. You guys keep great records.
And if I may interrupt for a second, on page 179, we have the answer for you. It provides a workload measure for the city manager's office, and the city clerk was kind enough of doing the counting for us. So if you look at the bottom of the page, there's the number of city council committee meetings, fiscal 2013, actuals 14, adopted, estimated, and proposed. So you'll see those numbers there.
They're probably, well, could be understated.
The adopted and the actual are rather interesting.
Yeah, I guess I would add to that on page 163. You do have public record requests, which seem to have doubled
Yes.
over the last couple of years. Now, is that because of the new systematic way we're dealing with them that comes through the clerk's office where they did not used to come through?
No, it's not using the new system that we're going to, but we do have better tracking with David Carnahan, the deputy city clerk, keeping better track of the records when the requests when they come in.
Yeah, I guess that was important because the council brought up the importance of that. So it's an indication that you are setting up systematically a way of tracking.
That's
the
correct.
flow of records.
If I just might add to that, I don't want us to miss the point here. We probably haven't gotten to 100%, you know what I mean, of funneling all of these through the one through the clerk's office. But obviously, given the time requirements of responding within 10 days to notify folks, this has been a great improvement. The clerk's office pretty much takes them in, sort of bird dogs the response in the departments. But unless it's actually for a record within the council or something like that, the majority of the actual run work is carried out by individual departments out here. So the full cost of what it takes to be responding to these record requests, we don't reflect anywhere exactly in the budget.
Right, but I guess it is important to know the flow that's coming through so we can sense it.
That gives you a sense of the number of requests.
Let's see, I have one question. I noted that the...
Greg, could I just finish off on
Oh,
that?
I'm sorry.
Because I'm just a bit puzzled, and perhaps I'm not reading it correctly on 179. Isn't that what you referenced, Walter?
Yeah.
So on 179, it lists the number of city council and city council committee meetings. And it has an actual, which is 103, and so forth as you go through that. Is that the number you were referencing, Beth, or not? You just said there were 58, but this, am I just perhaps I'm just not reading it correctly.
Right, the 58 is an estimate of city council meetings, and then in addition to that, we have an estimated for standing committee.
And so is that number actually proposed 100?
We were anticipating additional council meetings due to the request for the
Yeah.
meetings of the whole in that.
Okay. But you're still guessing that it'll be 100 for next year, right?
Correct.
And your number of staff reports issued is 725. And now, this is in the city managers. So are we mixing apples and oranges here or not?
No, but we're all doing the same work. But
All got the same apples, okay.
Can I make a comment about these numbers? I would question them.
I'm glad you said that, 'cause I'm like, no way.
Just a couple of reasons. I mean, they're just, I think we need to take a closer look at this. So, for example, we're seeing an increase of 500 as adopted in the budget of number of staff reports to 700 estimated. Okay? That's a very significant increase. My own experience would say, I wouldn't necessarily say we're whipping through items on the council meeting agendas faster than before. So we have more reports, and we're somehow having less meetings and holding hours steady. It just doesn't track with my experience.
Actually, look at it, 103 in 2013 at 318 hours.
Right.
Supposedly 700 reports, 97 meetings, so far fewer, but 375 hours. So none of this really tracks.
But the council and standing committee meetings also included the city school when we had the technology, when we had the infrastructure. Those were all included in those numbers of the 103, and we don't have those right now.
Yeah.
So perhaps we need to divvy it into real city council meetings, committee meetings, and special committees, just so that we can get clarity on it. Is that a possibility?
It's Councilor Beth.
Yeah, we can do that.
I think that'll give us a really clear picture of especially where staff has to spend their time as well, because every city council meeting we have must have, I'm guessing, 20 staff at them all. And that's also an inherent cost as well.
And the numbers I was quoting before of the 58 city council and 16 standing committee were ones where we had to provide food.
Oh, okay. That might differentiate some of it, right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Let's see, just one other small question. The contract services for 2016 are down $150,000. Page 180. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the city manager. On page 163, you have administrative citations. Taking $200,000 of the budget. What's a citation?
Under my purview is the hearing officer, and he hears all the administrative hearings when people want to contest their citations. And so that falls under that budget. And it's a 3/4 time budgeted person and a half-time admin person.
Okay. Good. I think we have a motion on the floor for preliminary approval. If there's no further discussion, all in favor? Aye. Passed unanimously. We'll move on to item number 3.
Which is the city council budget, page 168 to page 170.
Always got that.
Right?
I'd say move approval, wouldn't you?
Did you get a second?
I'm listening.
So, Greg,
Yeah.
so where would the food be in this budget?
It comes under the general expense. However, that includes the numbers that are listed there are not just the food, the general expenses also include, let me pull it up here, special events and awards,
Travel.
travel,
Meetings.
meetings.
Okay.
That might be a good one to break down, actually. Not now, I mean, for the full council.
So I guess I'll ask the question again then. It's 52, 45, 55. Is that enough money for, I mean, the clerk's office really runs the city council budget. I mean, you take all our travel expenses, you take all that stuff in, and, you buy the food and all that. I mean, we don't really see it. There's no one else who does that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's what I thought. So I guess the question is, and you can come back to us if you really aren't prepared tonight, but is that the right number?
So out of that amount, 25,000 is for travel and meetings. That's what we use when you go on travel to conferences and that. And so I've seen in the past that has been an okay number. The money for the food and that, last year I got a $2,000 increase. And this year I've already had to transfer $3,000 from from telephone and non-city to cover additional food costs. So we can use more money in there.
Well, I don't want us to just raise it for no reason, but I mean, if we're
No.
having problems, then I think we need as a committee to say to ourselves, what are we actually going to spend? And if we don't want to spend it, we can always say we're not going to provide food at all. I mean, on one extreme if we wanted to, or we're only going to provide a certain number of meals if we think it's too much. But I think it's foolish to not budget what the real number is. That's all. And so I guess if we're going to be transferring money from some other funds and you're under pressure, and I'd rather do the right budget number, and then if we have a policy discussion, that's a different issue. But I'd rather know exactly what you think we need.
And that's correct. I have had to move $3,000 this year, in addition to the $2,000 that was given to us last year, in order to be able to pay for and anticipate the food till the end of the fiscal year.
So you really probably need a $3,000 increase, unless we expect 2016 to be less.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have changed our starting time from 7 to 6, and every time there's a 6 o'clock meeting.
That changes everything.
No, but that's why I'm asking the questions, because I'm thinking we're being. So,
Yeah, there's a policy.
I mean, for now, I guess I'll make an amendment that we add $3,000, put it in the parking lot, and think about that as the right number.
I second it if you go with 5. I'm a little concerned that we're
I'm happy to go with 5, and we can
there's
think
so
about
much-
it and talk about it.
There's so much inherent in the
Yes.
food when we're eating that often, and I hadn't even realized we were eating that often.
So I'll change that to 5.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
Yeah, I put one on, but I didn't get a second.
Yeah, it needs to be seconded.
So I guess I'll second Liz's original motion as amended to add $5,000.
Okay. Okay. Let me add one question. I noticed that our healthcare benefits are fairly steady over time, but that the retiree medical started downward and all of a sudden moved upward. Now, my feeling here is that there's a rule in the city for the last decade that you need 10 years of service in order to qualify. And there shouldn't be any council members who are turned down qualified.
Yeah, but it goes
Why is
before
that
that.
number going up?
Larry and Liz both get health. I don't know if you
No,
take yours.
I don't.
But you'd be eligible for it.
Yeah, no, I still collect from the county.
Doesn't Larry qualify?
But then there's Eureka and
Right, but they were in it before. And while the
That's
number was
correct. So
going
what
down-
you look at, what the actuary does for us, they look at by department and by fund and see what the actual cost would be for retirees who are benefiting from this benefit today or will be in the future. So that's how it's calculated for future council members who are eligible to receive this benefit.
Keep in mind that some were eligible that have passed. So that should cross.
Yeah,
And
but-
less and less, to your point, less and less qualified, because you have to basically be a free term.
Yeah, if you're looking forward, The numbers should be virtually zero. So I would expect it to go down.
Well, the other thing what happened is they actually changed the methodology last year for calculating the unfunded liability for retiree healthcare, and that increased the cost across all funds, including the city council budget.
The implied subsidy being, remember that.
Okay. But in the long run, that number should not.
In the long run, it should reduce in the city council's budget, that's correct. In other budgets, not necessarily.
Keep our eye. Okay, any other comments?
What do we charge other funds? I mean, we get 100,000 in revenue for the council.
Sure.
That's a good question.
That's correct. So what happens, it rolls in. The city council, it's the utility funds, the internal service funds who pay for the city council budget part of it.
But why?
Because council does work related to the business of the funds. That's how we-
We're actually productive, Eric.
You're actually cheap because they would have their own body at a full cost versus a partial.
But we're earning more than we get at sales.
That's called productivity.
So we're a profit center.
We have a mystery raise, remember, that's coming in the future.
Vice Mayor, quick question on the motion. Just, we don't want, there was a mention of parking lot. We want to make sure we put it in the right spot. Did you intend for that $5,000 to be in the parking lot, or was it part of the tentative motion alone?
I'll just make the motion.
Absolutely.
I don't have to come back to it if we don't have to.
No, to down parking.
It's a tentative motion. You still have the opportunity to review those tentative motions when it comes up. But
We just want to have the parking lot clean.
Okay, if that's clear, then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. And I think this brings us to our last part.
The last consultancy city manager.
thank you. City manager's budget. Again, essentially no changes, except just operationally, and I'll speak to that, but I think the operative pages are page 180 and 181 in particular. I would say that even the initiatives or accomplishments that we identify they're really kind of a grab bag of things. I mean, like the council, like the city attorney, the city manager's office supports, a shifting and wider range of issues and those sorts of things. And so we just generally try to identify a few things that might have been more distinctive one year than the next, or illustrative of some of the variety. On page 181, the FTEs essentially really stay the same. There's actually a very slight reduction related to how we're doing some allocations. And if you go back to page 180, the total dollars expense is pretty minimal. We do, on the salary line, you'll see we've got a salary increase of projected of say $78,000 in this 2016 budget. I think the big difference here will be that when we look at the adopted budget for 2015, the actual expenses in that salary area ought to be significantly lower as there are two assistant city manager positions that remained essentially unfilled all of the year. And the 2016 budget, as I understand it, includes the management professional overall sort of increase or additional funding that's being spread in the organization. I think we actually have actual assistant salary placement in the proposed budget included here for the most part.
For the most part, correct.
Right, for the most part. So that's where there's again a little bit of a slight difference right there. So I would point out that both here tonight are both Ed Shikata and Suzanne Mason for the first time united here.
Hi.
Okay.
I didn't know
Together.
where you were.
Suzanne's very first day here. She started at 7:30, and so we just wanted to make sure she understood what she was getting into right off the bat. But obviously, we would look to be actually spending this money in 2016 with these folks on board. And I think we should see a significant productivity increase. I think sort of if you just sort of look at things that sort of change and are outliers or whatever, you see the drop in the contract services amount from 2015 to 2016. I think the biggest part of that is, as I recall, was we dropped our Palo Alto first year funding in the city manager's office budget, to support a lot of the outreach, the materials production, all of those sorts of things. And we've gotten through the first year, and I'm assuming that some of those costs are now just distributed and embedded in the work of the departments in the
Or
organization.
we may have to reappropriate some of the funds to next fiscal year.
Okay. So that's it.
Which happens through a separate action.
What does that mean?
What it means is when we have funds not spent yet and not encumbered yet.
Not spent.
Not spent and not encumbered.
Oh, we didn't spend the full 150?
We don't know.
Questions, comments? Council?
All right, questions. So, what are the contract services that you plan on spending for 2016? The $311,000. What is that?
Walter, can you guys help us with those?
Sure. So you have probably contract services in the Office of Economic Development, which are budgeted in here. Then I would think we would have to actually look more detail. I don't know that managed budget that well, but looking at figures. Christine is looking. So while you ask the next question.
All right, I'll move on to the next question while
You've got good staff.
Great staff.
So, general expenses. I mean, they were a lot in 2014. They were 132, and in 2015, the adopted budget was half of that. So now you're raising it back up 25. What are those as a general category?
Do we have the Know Your Neighbor grant program at all?
Yeah, that's in the budget. We actually inadvertently did not include in 2015, but it's in 2016.
That's what the $25,000 increase is at.
One page.
$25,000 grant. You remember when Councilmember?
I remember.
Yeah. Okay.
So the question is that's in your budget?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. Why is it in the city manager's budget as opposed to like community services? Maybe is there a particular reason?
Well, it's sort of been a citywide kind of program. It was a startup. Cash, I think, administers somebody in the office administers the actual grant program with folks, yeah. So we allocate the funding. It could ultimately be spun off to them, but.
So what other things besides that are the general expenses then? Roughly, I mean, I don't make it detailed.
You would have travel in there, you would have meeting expenses, meeting training, that's a general expense. We have to look at the cost in detail. The other thing about contract services, and Susan Mason actually is right helping out on her first day, she says lobbyist contracts. I said, yes, that's correct. We have lobbyist contracts in city manager's office.
Oh, right.
What's in the city manager?
The city manager's office.
So those are the state lobbyists and the federal lobbyists?
Correct.
Any sense roughly what those are?
I think about $100,000, and this is just from memory.
No.
It's $200,000. It's $200,000. Thank you. Perfect. Are you
For
okay?
both or one?
For both.
So that's in the contract
100.
services?
That's in the contract services.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's actually 2/3 of the 311.
Correct. And then the other one is the we have social media consultants that are helping, that we're using some salary savings for this fiscal year, or so
Okay. Yep.
economic development has a variety of little contracts.
So what kind of
What are you saying?
what would be an economic development thing if you know contract? Just curious as what does that entail? Does anyone has an example of what it would be like?
Yeah, so one thing that that economic development works closely with the bid and the chamber is on the street pole signs.
Okay.
So we have an ongoing contract with a firm to do that, and we fund that periodically. We often get contributions from the bid and the chamber for that, but sometimes we pay more, sometimes less.
Okay. And then my final question is, I was going to ask this on City Council. There's a City Council contingency fund and there's a City Manager contingency fund.
That's correct.
Is that in a separate budget
It's
area?
in the non-departmental that will
So that's-
include in that.
okay.
Is that correct?
So that's in the non-departmental.
Right. And I think that's probably where the city attorney's is also. Mala said it was in city manager, so it's in that same account.
Got it.
That's kind of the map we are looking at.
Pardon me?
Questions, Councilman Wilson?
Question on page 181. There's 0 for chief sustainability officer. So where's Gil?
So here's what
We have
happens. You will see this budget is up for discussion, I believe, on Thursday or next week, Tuesday. And what we have done is, in 2015, his position was split funded over several funds and departments. And in 2016, we're consolidating the central budget into his budget.
Right.
And that's where you see 0 now in the city manager's office at 0.05, and then we're taking it out, moving it over there.
So where is it?
It's
not
page
the city manager.
184. It's a whole separate
And also
chapter.
department,
Yeah. So we'll be on what night?
Thursday.
I think it's Thursday
This
or
Thursday, yeah.
Tuesday next week, which is kind of in my head. But you see, Councilman Phillips, on page 182, you see the transaction right there. It says sustainability, fourth line down, 0.05 FTE Office Sustainability Director, relocation from city manager's office to the Office of Sustainability. So we're trying to document it for you.
Councilman, yes?
No?
Let me ask a strategic question. I noticed from the auditor's report, if you take from fiscal year '09 to this year, the city manager's staff is down by 12%, and yet the expenditures are up by 45%. We're upgrading the city manager's office. Is that fair to say?
I think we have to take a look at that. Maybe we kind of send them a little memo on the piece because
Maybe
I
it's
don't really
much
think
more
so.
active in spending money on consultants and outside.
yeah, we'll have to look at those pieces because on the salary side, I mean, back in 2009, we would have had an assistant city manager, a deputy city manager, and an assistant to the city manager at that point in time. So it's got to be in some of those contractor or other components. Well, we could get you that if you'd like.
So you don't think the salaries have changed that much? I believe you now do have 2 assistant, experienced
Flat.
assistant at city manager.
Yeah, I think we have to look at it because, as you recall, during that period, 2009 through 2011, almost, we were flat on salary increases, really. We actually, some of us were taking 4 or 5% a year salary cuts, so we have to look at what that.
And a dramatic personnel drop. I think I counted 30 between.
Those years, you mean, not,
9
yeah,
and
across
10?
the organization,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there was a drop of 2 people.
What's the auditor's report? Sorry, we're looking
This
at.
piece that Harriet dropped off, displaying the performance,
Okay.
and she has 10 years of data
Mhm.
from each department, some other measures that
Well,
are helpful.
If we get a chance, why don't we look at that and kind of cross-tab that with the budget a little bit so we can answer that, is that correct?
Yeah, I guess I have a vested interest in saying the city manager can spend more of his time on strategy.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, definitely not anything on food, that's for sure.
Okay, good. So you'll follow up on that. Any other comments or questions?
Do you need a motion on this one, or do we do one?
No?
I would move the city manager's budget forward.
Second.
Second? Okay. Councilmember Charlotte has seconded that. Any other discussion or comments? All-
Yeah, just one.
Yeah.
When we say that, it's all tentative, right? Just so we're clear, we don't have to repeat that it's tentative, just to make it clear.
If you say that up front, that's good.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. And that brings us to the end of the council appointed officers. And we can move on to item number 3, community services.
That's correct.
Can we do a time check on how we're doing?
Well, we're supposed to be here at 6:45 and it's 7:40.
Zipping right along.
I am hoping that part of this was just beginning to familiarize you with the sort of the pages, the structure of the, because these have been tiny little offices in comparison to where we're going to be going here shortly.
Yeah, I think some of the same questions will come up.
Sounds great. So next on is Rob DeGois. He is our Community Services Department Director. It's his first year. So good luck with you. Your PowerPoint is ready.
The good news is you have not filled your vacant position that you used to have. Is that correct? So you could always go back there if you want. I'm not saying you did, but if you desired to.
Thanks, Jim. I'll keep that in mind. Good evening, council members. Rob DeGois, Director of Community Services. Good to see you all here. I'm joined with Lando. He's our budget analyst for the Community Services Department. He's done a lot of work preparing the budget. We also have senior staff from the department behind you over there, the three divisions that we have in Community Services. So they're available should we need more specific answers. The mission of Community Services, I have a quick presentation so we can get into the questions and discussion quickly here, but the Community Services Department mission is to engage individuals and families to create a strong and healthy community. We do that through parks and recreation services, social services, the arts, and sciences. Really, I think about the purpose of community services in this way, that we're really trying to improve the quality of life for people that live in Palo Alto, that visit Palo Alto, that work here. And we're really focused on health and well-being and creative expression in its broadest sense. So that's what we do. We do every day. We have some great assets to work with. The council, over many decades, has invested in community services, in parks and recreation, and that's why we have 37 parks and 3 theaters and a junior museum and a children's theater. It's just really outstanding community services assets that you really don't see in most other cities. So just quickly on accomplishments of the last year, obviously with such a large department, very diverse, we did many things. These are just a small sliver of those. We opened up the new Mitchell Park Community Center and Library. Fantastic space. People are really enjoying it. We completed the construction of the Magical Bridge Universal Playground. It was a partnership with Public Works and Community Services, and also non-profit partner Friends of Palo Alto Parks, and they raised 90% of the funds that allowed us to build that playground. So I don't know if you've had a chance to visit there, but it's quite something. Our arts institutions, the Arts Center in particular, I just wanted to call them out. Karen Kinzel's the director of the Arts Center. I'm sure you've all met her. She's constantly doing innovative work at the Arts Center, and it's just it's impressive. They continually win state awards, and they're just pushing the envelope with respect to the arts. And Children's Theater and Junior Museum also. Children's Theater continues to grow its program, its fee-based program in particular. They're focused on recovering more costs, so they're doing very well. And our open space and parks, we added some additional trails to the park system, mainly Bixby Park related there, and we're advancing the Foothills Fire Management Plan that the council adopted in 2009, I believe. So initiatives going forward, thank you, Walter. We have a few here. Completion of the Parks, Trails, Open Space, and Recreation Master Plan. It's a 2-year process. We're a little over halfway through that. We've done a lot of community outreach. It's going very well. We're about to move into the assessment of all of that outreach and begin to prioritize and set some recommendations for council to review. We have our Project Safety Net Collaborative for Youth Wellbeing. Continues to be very important to residents, and I know to the council, and certainly to our department. So we're reinvesting in that collaborative and trying to set it on a footing where it can have greater impact into the future, as well as some of the other programs you see here, the HISREP program and homeless services, a number of initiatives there. Working on an exciting negotiation with the Junior Museum and Zoo. The Friends of the Junior Museum and Zoo is a partner of ours. We have 5 nonprofit partners that are in existence just to support the Department of Community Services. The Friends of the Junior Museum and Zoo is one of those. And a very good board, strong board, and they have a vision to rebuild the Junior Museum and Zoo. Very exciting. And they would like to have some governance authority over that new Junior Museum and Zoo once it's built, if that can be done. So there was a letter of intent that the council approved, and staff and the Friends are working on terms that we can then come to council with. So we're in the midst of those negotiations. And just mention the Art Center again here. They're working on a variety of different programs, but they're one interesting one where they're assessing community engagement around next generation audiences in museums, which will be pretty interesting work coming out of the Art Center. So then we go to significant budget proposals, and you've all seen the budget. There's several things in there that we don't have time to go over in the presentation, and I'm sure you wouldn't want that, so we're just going to highlight a few things. The way I would describe it is there's two categories of increases that you see. One category is increased in cost for doing business, so there's increases in custodial costs, in park maintenance costs, animal care, temporary salaries for our instructors for a variety of programs. So that's a whole category there. And then there's increased cost for doing something more of, or new or improved programs and services. And that's the second category. And then what we have also is new revenues in both of those categories to try and offset as many of those costs as possible. So that's they are the two categories that we have 4 or 5 here that we just call out. The first one, I think, is probably the most important one, and if I was sitting in your shoes, it would be the one I want to talk about most, because it's adding a staff person to the table of org. It's a management position, and it's expensive. And so, and this is the one staff person we focused on as the critical operational need for our department. Of course, there are other needs. But a little history on this one. This relates to the superintendent of recreation and to support special event coordination. Community services has contributed a lot to the cuts of the city budget over the years, and actually feel pretty good and proud about that. Worked closely with Lalo over those years. Some challenging, difficult decisions about contracting out. And certainly the recreation division did a lot there. We had a dedicated manager for at-risk youth. We had a dedicated manager for special events. We had a superintendent of recreation. We had a dedicated manager for a business manager just for recreation services, and all those positions are gone. And we have a much leaner division within recreation, much more productive, I think, but we are sort of left with somewhat of a structural gap, and maybe we've gone a little bit too far, and so we don't have quite the oversight that I would like to see in the recreation division. It does a lot. This is the largest division of the 3 divisions. We have a parks, an open space division, largely maintenance, and our ranger staff. We have our arts and sciences division, which is the 3, Junior Museum and Zoo, Children's Theater, Art Center, Arts and Sciences. And public art. Thank you, Rye. We have great public art. And we have the recreation division, which is the community centers and sort of operations of the golf course, and that division alone, Cumberley as well, generates $3.5 million in fee-based revenues and rental revenues, and it's a lot, and it takes a lot to manage, and to manage the recreation team, which is a group of really talented staff. And we really do need that superintendent to hold that team together, to build the brand of the recreation division, to provide better oversight of the cash handling at all the different centers. We have a recreation foundation That's one of the 5 nonprofit partners. The Recreation Foundation has a lot of potential to do a lot more and generate a lot more revenue. But they need support, and they need support from staff, and we haven't been able to really provide them the support. And when you do provide good support to a nonprofit arm, they can do amazing things. And we see that at the Art Center, and we see it at the Junior Museum Zoo. So this person would invest in that nonprofit partner. I'm not going to talk as much about these other bullet points, but this is...
No, I'm glad you're talking about it.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got lots of questions about it, as you should. And so the other piece, other than supporting the operations of the Recreation Division, is special events. We used to have, it was about 3 staff dedicated to special events some years ago, and they've all gone away at this point, and so we manage special events as a department, and everybody, I tell everybody they're special event staff, and they're going to show up. But in reality, it takes a lot of coordination and management, and they're good for the community. They really do create a sense of place. And I think what I'm hearing from the community and others, Jim, council members, that we want to see even more, do more of events where we can bring the community together around celebrations and things like that. And what's happening now is, we're sort of scrambling to get those events done. We're able to keep the traditional events going, but when new events come up, and they come up all the time, every year there seems like there's an additional 5 or 10 events that we have to take on. It's like, who's on point? And a lot of times we're drawing really from the city manager's office, Tommy Fahrenbach, or Cash, if he's still here, or Claudia Keith. And so they're involved in actually helping making these events happen and being pulled away from other really important work that they're meant to do. And then in addition to that, we have members of the public that come forward that want to do events. They have ideas, and then they try and work with the city, and it's cumbersome, and it's not an easy process, and who do you got to... There's no point person. And so the thought here was that this superintendent, the senior level position, would be able to coordinate that interest of the member of the public that comes, that wants to actually do an event, and not run the event for them, but help them through that process of working with police department and public works and city hall. So we think it'd be a really good thing for the city if we had that position doing both of those things. So let me just quickly go over these others, and then we can get into the questions. But Mitchell Park is another area where I feel like more investment is a good thing. It's offset by revenue, so maybe that makes it a little bit easier. But it's a great success. We have so many people coming to Mitchell Park and enjoying the space, the teen center, the programming there. And so we want to be sure that we are staffed up and can provide the services and the cleanliness and attractiveness that people expect when they arrive there. So it's really contract dollars and hourly staff to support the Mitchell Park Center. The next one is Mitchell Park also and the Lucy Stern Community Center. And this is really facility attendance. We have a lot of interest in rental activity of both Mitchell Park and Lucy Stern Community Center, and we have a limited budget to hire facility attendants to be there on weekends and evenings. Every night of the week we have rentals at these spaces, and so this is also offset by new rental revenue. Art Center is doing great, has lots of interesting classes, a lot of wait lists, so we add some program dollars there for their adult classes, in particular their studio classes, offset by revenues. And the last one is just a furniture replacement. We don't have a fund to replace furniture, which seems silly. This is not really a solution to that problem ongoing, but at least it gets us in a better place. I don't know if you've had a meeting at the Lucy Stern Center recently, but if you have, you'll notice that all the corners of the tables are chipped and they're all different colors, and it's just... And sometimes we have people from out of town in the region, and it can be a little embarrassing. So in any case, we want to replace some of the worst of the furniture that we have at some of our centers. And Alma Plaza is another example. It's a new community center that we've brought on that we're trying to rent out or have the public use at no cost, and didn't come furnished. And so this will allow us to buy a few additional tables and chairs for that room. But this is a one-time $25,000 request. So that's that's just a preview. I know there's a lot more in the community services budget and available to expand on these areas or answer questions. Thank you.
Ron.
Quick one, Greg.
Yeah.
If the black and white ball falls under the rec foundations,
It does.
when it's done,
When it's done, and they have elected not to do it this last time, and that's partly indicative of the board, and they need support and growth, and so they're struggling a little bit.
that's city staff.
City staff are very involved, as Minka points out. This is very true. There is some talk about bringing it back. I mean, there's interest there. The Chamber of Commerce, yeah.
It's a good community.
Yeah, and with the new Mitchell Park Center, we've scoped that out as a possible location using the parking lot for different venue. Yeah, so.
Other council members?
Sure. Unless you were.
I'll start with a brief, right, the recreation division superintendent.
Yeah.
I mean, how should we think about that? Should we think about, if we do this person, we'll get X more special events per year, or, I mean, how do we think about that?
So the request for the superintendent also includes additional contract dollars for special events.
45,000.
Right. 10,000 of that 45,000 is really to support summer concerts, which are underfunded. 35,000 would be for additional events. And the superintendent would help support that, whether they are sort of city-driven events by council or some other thing, or members of the public say, hey, I've got an idea, can we help with this? Is yet to be seen. But it'll happen. I mean, even today, I think we had a meeting at enough. I think Tommy actually led the meeting with the mayor. The mayor wants to do 3 new events this summer. They're great, actually, really good idea. But it's street closures, one around literacy, one around music, and another dance. Is it dance? In any case, very, very. It's to support that type of thing and make those things happen in a more efficient way without drawing staff from other important work.
So now the way some of that you're borrowing from, you said Tommy Fair and Claudia Keith and people like that to do this.
I think it's, and Jim can chime in here, it's not a sustainable model. I think that we're asking too much of those stuff. They're really good. And Tommy has a real, he's a knack for special events, and he's just very good, and he's a sort of a can-do kind of guy, and he'll just lend a hand wherever it's needed. But, it's a burden.
Well, I think the issue is the workload's picking up in other areas for the folks who have been devoted to doing this. I mean, just this year, Tom will be spending a lot more running interference on the business registry program, for example. And so he would not get out of the special events part. I mean, to the extent that he's got these great relationships with different constituent groups, we'd still want to deploy him. But I will tell you that I've really come around to the fact that these special events are one of the really distinctive value adds that the city provides. I think it affects a lot of folks who, in many sense, never have an encounter with the city, who aren't at a council meeting necessarily. And I say this from a series of meetings I've just sort of had with different citizens over the past 18 months who, and I've asked them sort of, they'll kind of go, I don't know what you guys really do, but I love when Palo won the championships, and we had that great parade and the event and all of those sorts of things, and we brought our kids out. I'm here because of the quality of the schools and the quality of our neighborhoods, and for a lot of people, they see these special events are things we do that really bring the community together around typically things that are shared values or interesting kinds of things.
Can I follow up on this particular topic?
Yeah.
So, you haven't convinced me, to be honest. I'll tell you where what you're basically saying to me is this. And you guys have been doing a great job with special events. In the last 5 years, we've had a ton of special events.
Yeah.
They've all gone well. I could name a whole bunch of them, everything from the hackathon to the Martin Luther King to... So, what you're really saying to me is, we're not adding anything new, really. We're just going to make it easier on everyone because it's not a sustainable model. So if you said to me instead that, hey, we need to hire this person, and we're going to have these 10 extra great events, and we're going to budget an extra $200,000 for it, and it's going to be fantastic, and we're going to have movies on the plaza, we're going to have... So I guess I'm feeling like, this is just spending huge amount of money, in my view, on salary without telling me what we're going to get. So I sort of feel like you have to go big or go home. And right now it's going home.
Greg, it's a really good point. Because I think you can't keep yanking from within, you can't keep pulling from within your own staff. I know Tommy will he'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
But he's got a child now and other obligations, and while we usually don't discuss that in session like this, I think we have to acknowledge what staff can actually do. So Greg, I think that's good. And when it goes to the whole council, say, here is what's going to happen with this money.
Well, I'm
make
not
it
actually
clear.
okay with that, Liz. I'm
You're okay
saying
with which?
what you just said. I actually am happy to put it in the parking lot. I probably will end up supporting it. But I guess I want to have a discussion about what we're really going to get. And I don't want it to be 40. I mean, the fact that you're spending $300,000 on staff and $45,000 on the extra events doesn't sit well with me.
35, because 10,000.
Like 35. If you came to me and said, we're going to have some great events, and you know what? You're going to spend an extra amount of money on $200,000, $300,000 on staffing, and we're going to spend $150,000, $200,000, and it's worth it because we're going to bring the community together, and here's my vision. I'd be good with it. I'm not good with spending $35,000 on the actual events and $300,000 on the staff. I'm not going to support that. So I guess I want to know, come up with a bolder and bigger vision for me, and I'll support it.
Yeah, I'm going to push back on it a little bit.
That's fine.
Rick, because
Get the numbers right, first of all. This isn't just about special events. When you came to me with the recreation superintendent, there was a whole range of recreation things you were after.
Support you.
Okay, great. I appreciate that.
So that the first part of my talk on the superintendent was what Jim was talking about, and so maybe I'll just go over that again. The recreation division has reduced 4 full-time managers within the division, and
Say that again, slow it.
has
Reduced.
4 full-time managers within the division of recreation.
But in 2010, right?
Over the years, and I've sort of absorbed that work mostly, the superintendent work, the management work, and all of those things. And in reality, it isn't sustainable. So what you're hearing is that what you're saying is everything's fine, looks fine, you're doing a great job.
You're doing a great job.
Yeah, but
that's why we promoted you.
But that's not the reality of on the ground. And maybe we don't do a good job of that. Frankly, we don't. Actually, we never say no. You say come do something, and we say okay, we'll do it, and we keep doing it. And in reality, we don't have the resources and stuff to do it properly. And so we got burned out staff. You think we're doing a great job, but in reality, we're missing important parts of that job, and it's inevitably something's going to fall through the cracks at one point. Now, we don't want to wait for that to happen, do we? I mean, that there is a disaster, and then you say, "Oh, yeah, I get it. You need a staff member to actually hold the."
So what would the staff member actually do? Can you break it out? What his time's going to be spent on? What he's actually going to do? What are we getting from money?
So the person, you think about the recreation division. Let me show you understand what's within that division. It's the Lucy Stern Community Center, the New Mitchell Park Center, and the Coverly Community Center. All the activity that occurs in those centers. It's all the special events that we do. It's the aquatics programs, all the activity in our parks and fields. And summer camps alone, we have 4,000 kids in our summer program. As I said, they generate $3.5 million in revenues as a division. It gives you kind of a sense of what happens in the division. And what we need is really someone that holds that division together in that sense, is really working to brand and market the programs as a recreation division. We really don't have that.
And right now, who's doing it? Who's doing that job? So you're doing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so your replacement, why is that not that person?
That person will lend a hand, but as I was doing that job, I was also managing the Parks and Rec Commission, the capital budget we have, and doing sort of strategic planning. And in reality, I know I was not giving the time and attention that was needed to the recreation division and the staff there, and building that staff and that work group. And in reality, I think if we do this and we have the right person, we're going to generate as much revenue as it costs to pay for that person and more. It's going to take time, particularly if we can build the Recreation Foundation to do more than it is doing now. So it's really a two-part request. One, and for me, I get the special events piece is the sexy piece, and that's what you want to say, well, yeah, that I want to fund, but this other piece, not so much. It is the other piece that's more important for operational reasons, really, to keep the department humming and secure and sort of risk-free, as I like to think about it. I think even just to the cash handling that happens at all of these centers that we have in the pool, the money that goes into it. Supporting the golf course and managing just the rounds of golf and marketing that golf course. We don't do enough.
Course?
It's still open, but it's not, the time, we need to spend more time on it and get out there and market and support the course. When, I'm saying we're not doing anything, but we're not doing enough, and it's limited resources. Now, that's not to say the special events piece isn't real. It is real. I think with this position and this coordination, we are going to see better events, more events. Exactly what they are, I couldn't tell you right now, but we'll see more events. And your point about investing in more events, well, I don't agree with that, actually. That's something we can contract out. Producing events, people do that, and we can get that. What we don't have, and which you can't contract out, is leadership that can steer more than row, right, and walk people through a process and clean up our special events permitting process. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's 20 pages, and it's a challenge for anyone to try and fill it out to try and run an event. You'll turn around right away when you see that. One of the first things we'll do with this individual is clean that up, create a sort of a tiered permitting process where if there's simple events, it's a one-pager, or one of many things we could have this individual do.
I thought it's just on that one issue, so if you have other questions.
Could I add? Sorry.
Go ahead, yeah.
I'm going to jump in. So, if I might,
Real quick, can you grab a microphone right there?
one of these that's working. Just to add from experience, perhaps.
State your name for the record.
Ed Shikada, interim assistant city manager. Speaking from experience in terms of the risk created by what we're really talking about is that staff will stretch. Staff will stretch when necessary in order to achieve a goal, especially when an event is new. It's the sustainability to keep that level of effort ongoing. So in addition to some of the issues, and Rob pointed out the risk associated with continuing to rely on staff at that level of effort, would be the labor relations issues, such as the grievances that can come up when a supervisor is not adequately trained and not adequately providing the support for their staff. So, there are a number of ways that these issues play out to the negative, and I think one of the line items that was pointed out earlier was the general insurance claims and the like. Those are the types of costs that go up when the type of sustainability that Rob was referring to is not supported.
Yeah, I wonder if I could add a layer to this. Looking at the auditor's 10-year look, there's striking numbers about the Community Services Department that indicates things change over time. It change quite dramatically. Theater attendance over the 10 years is down by 16%. Recreation classes by 32%. Athletic fields down by 30%. Golf rounds down by 40%. Special circumstances. But at the same time, other activities show very sharp growth. Child theaters up 38%, classes, theater classes up by 300%, child rec classes up by that amount, art visitors up by 30%.
Mm-hmm.
Yet across this, what shows up very dramatically is staffing is down by 15%. Staff per resident is down 22%. Expenditures per capita by the department grows at less than 1%. It would indicate that staffing is a critical piece here. It's not just for special events, as you say, it's to keep the activities growing and out there. I guess the athletic fields has been a big issue. We have more and more people want to use it, and there seem to be less fields available. So, how do we deal with that? How do we reach out and run programs, get permits that are easy to get, run things effectively? So I guess if you can articulate that these are the base problems you're trying to deal with, I'd be a real supporter of adding a person. That maybe, as you say, special events might be one piece of it, but it's not the whole thing that the department needs. And this department is one that seems to have, cutbacks in staff per resident is much lower than it has been.
Let me ask a question on that, which I think
Your microphone on, please.
is sort of connected to that too, which is, I mean, it is an extension of the same thing, which is you've got contract services, okay, which is taking a substantial increase from 3.5 million to 4.8 million next year. And then I see it's bumped around a little bit. To what extent?
Can you go?
Yeah. To what
Page
extent?
218.
I'm on page 218. Yeah. To what extent do changes in contract services correlate with the question you asked, which is sort of trends in the staffing in terms of we've outsourced these kinds of things? I mean, are those related?
The biggest jump here that you see is really related to the golf course. We had anticipated the golf course would be closed for a full year. It's going to be open for half a year, and it's all contracted out in terms of maintenance and support. But that's the large. There are within that are program service contract dollars. Most of our programs are contracted. This is true. We look at doing alternative service delivery all the time, and I think it's the future, actually. I think that it's not about building back up the city staff to previous times. I think when I first started with the city, community services was over 100 full-time staff, and we're not looking to go back there, and this is not in any way the beginning of that, nor do we think it ought to be. I've been a big supporter of looking at alternative service models and led the golf course contracting out of the maintenance as an example, and it was better. We have better maintenance and it costs less, so you can't do it for everything. But in this situation with recreation services and special events, I think it's a good investment because it's a leadership position that can then leverage nonprofit partners and the community to do even more, as opposed to funding specific service delivery.
So, if I was to say, I'm thinking of this myself. You're a new department head.
Sure.
What's important to me is that you run it efficiently, and that you think to yourself, how can we save money? What can we outsource when necessary, like you did with the golf course? And I know you have a record of doing that. If I said, let's go ahead and do this, but I want to know, if you had to cut your budget by 5% in other areas, what would you do? What would you suggest? How would you suggest that you save money to offset this?
I would suggest that we generate revenue. I think what we do in community services is one of extremely high quality and of high interest to the members of the public. And I think there's opportunity to ask for additional fee-based programs for that unique experience that we provide. And I think you see it built in here. We have $1 million of additional revenues in this budget. I think we can do more with that. And I'm sure we can do it within recreation services if it's organized in the right way and it's staffed appropriately.
So what you believe is that if we hire this person, that you'll more than pay for it?
Over time.
How long is over time?
$3 years.
So what kind of things would we be doing that would create the new revenue that we'd be able to do with that staff? I mean, he's a manager. He's not someone that's actually doing something. So, I don't mean that in a negative way. But I mean...
We can say that because we've been managers.
Right, I don't mean that in that negative way, but, it's directing, looking at the group, as you said, holding it together.
Yeah.
He's not out there actually, I don't know. But anyway.
Perhaps building relationships as an example.
Certainly. And Carolyn? Yeah, so I think I'll go to Greg Schmidt, Councilmember Schmidt's point about the SEA report. If you look at some of those numbers, it troubles me, particularly in the recreation classes and programs, that we see a declining number of enrollments and classes being offered. Now, part of that is we're offering, we're charging more fees and trying to improve cost recovery, so we're losing a little bit. But I think with a concerted effort to build a brand around recreation services and programming, we can see that trend turn around and start to go up, and we'll see additional participation, more fee-based revenue. That would be one thing. The other thing I would point to is the Palo Alto Recreation Foundation. I mentioned it before, but I think one thing we have in this community, which is really a great resource, is residents. The residents care so much. I mean, they really do care, and if we can support them and organize them in a way that they can be out there as ambassadors for a particular program or service, there's a lot of money that can help support programs. The Art Center is a good example. What is it, $4 million that they raised to help refurbish the Art Center, and it's great. We have many examples of that. I think the Rec Foundation can do that too.
So,
If I can, we could sort of start to converge on this a little bit. And maybe this is the right way to think about it, maybe it is, right? But it seems to me that from a mechanical perspective, I mean, we could say, yes, let's approve this. We could say, no, let's not approve this. Or we can say, let's put it in the parking lot until we see sort of all the other things that are going to go in the parking lot as well. So, I mean, my instinct, I think all our instincts, is that community service is one of the things that, actually we really want to spend money on in Palo Alto. Okay? But there's only so much. There's quite a bit of paranoia on this side of the table about increasing expenses in the future, particularly around pension and liability expenses.
I can appreciate that.
And so I don't know that expenses growing as fast or faster than revenue is a sustainable model for the long term, especially given your comments, there's going to be a downturn one of these days and so forth, right? So I think that's sort of the three three options. Right?
I'm probably in the parking lot, but
I think I kind of am too. I mean, it's all discretionary stuff, and I'd kind of like to see what else is going to go in the parking lot over the next few days.
yeah, if I could just make the case that, that charge for services, $1 million projected for 2016, is a very powerful number. It diminishes the cost once that, do we want to reach that target, put it in the parking lot? What are you putting in for?
Yeah, it's not a question of making money. It's a question of how do we deliver more services without who we can afford.
and I also didn't hear that argument from Rob. I heard that gaining $300,000 is a 3-year process.
Right.
So at most, I heard it's $100,000 in gaining revenue by hiring this person in the short run. So I wasn't sure I didn't hear it would impact $1 million. I mean, I'm probably going to support it. I think we can have that discussion when we get to the parking lot. I want to think about it. I don't want to just agree right now. I also would like you to better flesh out the sexy part of this a little bit. I would. I
understand.
I would. I actually wanted to move on a little bit and just ask you briefly. On number 2, I have no issue with it. It looks like you're making money on it, or it's roughly a break even. On the operating hours and the team.
Oh, okay. The Mitchell Park, yeah.
Right. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. The Foothills Fire Management Plan.
Yeah.
You didn't mention that really, but I assume that we've been doing this. It's an important thing we need to do.
Correct.
We should fund it.
Right.
The Lucy Stern facility staffing. I just was caught by the words temporary salaries, and then ongoing. It costs us $11,000. So if it's ongoing, how temporary is it? I guess I don't understand what the word temporary salaries means in the context.
They're hourly staff, so they're unbenefited staff.
So is that what we mean by temporary
Yeah.
salaries? When we use that term, it just means they're hourly staff.
That's right.
So I don't have a particular issue with that. The workshops and classes, I think that's fine. I don't really have an issue there. The furniture, You know, I actually did have an issue, and my issue is the opposite of your issue, probably. It's more that I hate it when as a city we don't build a sustainable model and things fall through the crack. And I made this speech at council the other day. I don't know if any of you remember it. It's that we don't maintain everything, and that it drives me crazy.
And what's next? I think
And
you said.
right, and what's next? And so I actually am not going to support this. I want you to have a fund that replaces the furniture. So I want you to come back to us and set up a fund that's sustainable, that's on an ongoing basis, so that we don't have chipped furniture. I mean, you don't have to come to us every month, hat in hand, and say, I need to replace the chipped Formica table. I actually want a sustainable plan to get this stuff done.
Isn't that the infrastructure thing? Yeah.
Well, I don't know what it is. I want every department to not be letting things fall apart. Simply put.
Okay, well, that's beyond this, just community services, as you acknowledge, you know, how we look at this in an organization. Probably does get us into IBREC infrastructure territory between what is catch-up versus what is keep-up, to borrow their terms. I mean, you know, so very well could be that Rob right now is saying, look, we gotta fix this stuff. You know, it's not just the fund, and then we have to have a way to do it in an ongoing way. So it may be, you know, this obviously plus more. But again, I think it's a kind of across the organization issue, because you're really talking about a mindset or orientation towards where we are.
Yeah, but baby steps, Jim. That's how this stuff happens.
Well, this is a baby step.
No, it's a one-time placement.
No, but that's a baby step. So I would say the baby step plus what you're asking is what we ought to look at. That's just something I think we need to think about. Let me say one other thing. I agree with the idea of putting this stuff in the parking lot. As a matter of fact, I would suggest we try to get a little more efficient right here, which is we've got about 10 or 12 positions. Let's even almost assume every one of those is going to be an issue in some way. Find a way to cull that out, not spend 40 minutes talking about each one here and then still putting it in the parking lot. We're having a lot of people still sitting around when we might be able to get through some of these things and know where we're going to really need to look at these. The second thing I would just say is that we are only looking at part of the return on investment, because that's what we're really talking about. What's the return on investment if we add a new expense to us? How quickly can we pay it back? So we're kind of trying to use almost a private sector profit model. Even then, we still haven't really talked about what we're really getting for when we do that. And so it's one of the problems with budgeting is it does tend to look at the marginal changes. And anytime you're sort of asking for something new, we put it through this. We have no process at all for saying, have you assessed the cost for quietly assuming new things with your existing capacity all the time, and what's the cost of that? So I'll tell you right now, I mean, part of the reason I recommended this position, and I'm fine with it in the parking lot, but I have a new director here who's been in recreation for a long time, who has been part of doing a lot of cutbacks, who has come in and said, with all the demands and stuff we have, we really need this position. We haven't done one single assessment of how much time the assistant director of recreation, now the director, is spending on Project Safety Net, a non-community services program in a sense per se, but a necessity because of an issue we had in the community and the capacity for us to be able to say, here's somebody who could effectively do it, has built some relationships. I don't know what it is. Maybe Rob spends 40%, 50% of his time on essentially a community services. We don't have a good process for saying, well, let's not do that because we're taking away from other capacity, or to say, well, how is it that we really can effectively supplement that? And we've been just in that issue. He's been having to work through all kinds of issues about how could we get a contract person actually run Project Safety Net, people coming and going. So the reality of making stuff happen is up and down all over the place. And one of the things we are dealing with, and it is a little bit back to the special events, we can sort of pick up some slack for a while, but it's sort of human nature to not be able to just sort of keep doing that on top of everything else. we do a lot of special events because whoever is mayor wants to respond to the community. We're not sitting there with a program about all special events, or people in the community come and say, and to be honest with you, I collude with everybody. I say, come on, I think it would be really good if we could do that. Can't we eke this out? But it builds up. And then when the pressures are rising elsewhere, and people are saying, why haven't we got this done? Why haven't they gotten that done? Everyone starts to go, how am I supposed to manage all of this? So, and then the other challenge we just have is actually doing the analysis and quantifying and everything to be able to justify what is really happening out there. That's another whole bit of work that people have to stop to do. So I'm just trying to express, Rob is not doing this, but I can tell you right now, underneath the surface is going, my God, how am I going to get all this? Perfect example. Right now, we're losing money on the golf course. I'll bet you he spends and his staff spends more effort on the golf course right now as we're losing it than when it was just smoothly running. We're running interference on the whole issue of how do we meet with the water board. He's meeting with all this sort of stuff. And so what might have been typically 0.10% of his time, let's just say when he's the assistant director, could very well be 35% in a year like this. So I think at some point as we go through this process, particularly, we've got to find some way to balance that out. And I do recognize that one of the key things, and it's the reason I led with what I led with, that this is a difficult issue for the council. It's a difficult issue for me. I've been saying for years, I don't think we can have 1,100, let's say it's 1,100 is our number of existing full-time benefit. We can't have 1,100 people going forward. We said, maybe we have to have 800 or 750. I don't know, but it's something even less than we have. And it's very difficult for me to recommend these new positions, too, because I basically know we're in a problem. But we don't have a commensurate way to tamp down the demand on the other side. So I think we need to think about as we go through this process, because I don't think you're really asking about this position or that position or that. You're really dealing about the systemic structural piece. You know what I mean here? Saying, geez, we better really make sure every one of these is absolutely worth it, because we know every time we're adding it, we're actually kind of digging a hole for ourselves a little bit. And I don't have the answer for that, but I'd rather make sure we have it in a concentrated discussion than in each one of these where we could take an hour of time on a position. And honestly, to be honest with you, we could have 10 people sitting around here who could have been dismissed also. And while we're talking about efficiency, we got to start thinking about that too. Sorry. And it's almost 8:30. It's 3 hours.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying this to dissuade parking lot, honestly.
Yeah, I think we need a motion.
Well, I'll move approval of his budget with the parking lot. Of that item.
Second. Okay, we have a motion. Want to say anything to it? Let me say one thing.
I normally would support this, but I can see that when we take this back to council again, we're going to spend another hour on it. And Rob has just stepped into this, and we finally have some stable footing. I don't think this is that much money that I wouldn't do it this year, reassess it as the year goes along.
Oh, we can't reassess because you can't fire people in the city. Never happens.
Well, while you can't, you can move people around.
Let's get people to the issue. I'm going to vote against it. I think Rob really should be coming in triumph tonight. I was out walking over the weekend and noted that there is open, or will soon be open, a 27-acre new parkland in the Baylands, beautiful trails up on the hilltops, beautiful spring day, wonderful thing for the city. It's a triumphal time.
Wow.
And, I think the staff, the recreation division has been reduced over time, and to maintain what we are, new parkland that's appropriately approved it, so I would be voting against the parking lot.
You can't, by your own rules. I hate to remind you, but the way we actually agreed that we do this is 2 people can put it in the parking lot.
Right.
And so if you vote against the motion, we don't approve his budget. So I think you need it.
Councilmember Sharp, Could you possibly split the two items so the rest of the department budget seems like you're all in agreement if I'm reading this right? If not, that's okay, I'll step out of it.
There's no vote on the parking lot.
I'm perfectly happy to have that moved to the parking lot with 2 members do it. But I just want to say, should be a triumphal night in Parks and Rec.
Thank you, council members.
Okay, so,
Can I comment on that briefly?
yeah,
It may yet be, because one of the outcomes of the parking lot is we give it more than $45,000 for the program. I think Councilmember Sharp.
That's what I asked you to do.
okay, so that has moved to the parking lot with 2 members pushing it. The rest of the budget.
The rest of the budget you're getting let go through.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are we all in favor of that?
Yes.
Yes. Vote?
Yes.
Okay, the rest of the budget passes.
Can I just give a quick shout out, thank you to Mike Bruckner. He's one of the analysts at ASD. He works with a number of departments. He worked with CSD this year, and he was tremendous in helping us work through the analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us a little late
Thank you all.
to human service.
Human resources, there's some pages 4 to 8 starting. Kathy Shell will make a presentation. They actually talk about several areas here. The Human Resources Department and the Employee Benefits Fund.
There was some pages, there was one page missing out of this memo here.
What you got? I just put a page to a memo for you. This was tonight.
This is the second page. This here.
Oh, the first.
Yeah, that's
Oh, give me a heart attack. I know, and so, what I just said is, I'm going to read it on. I can see
all of it already.
Yes.
That's not my fault. Whose fault is
That's the shrinking benefit savings.
It is also an
Because after the previous grilling, you want to have a small budget, right?
Good evening, Kathy Shen, Human Resources, People Strategy and Operations. So the mission for our department is to recruit, to develop, and retain a really diverse workforce, well qualified and professional, to reflect the high standards of Palo Alto, and to lead departments in positive employee relations, talent management, succession planning, and employee engagement. So the overview of this budget is that the headcount is not changing. We do have some contracting dollars added to help us do some data analytics and really upgrade our human resource information system. We'll get to that in a little bit. I did want to comment on the divisions. You see total compensation, employee relations, organization development, etc. We've actually got a different model for service delivery this year. We have human resource business partners who work with a group of dedicated departments. So in the past you had managers and employees who had to go to 3 or 4 or 5 different people in the department depending on if they had a recruitment question, a workers' comp question, a grievance, etc. So we have one face of human resources to each department. So we'll probably be changing these the way our costs are allocated in future years. Some of our accomplishments, we've completed and implemented 5 total compensation studies for different employee groups for SEIU, IAFF, POA, the management and confidential group, and utility managers. We've completed recruitments
2 assistant city managers, community service director, city clerk, assistant director of planning and community environment, plus over 100 staff positions have been filled year to date so far. So our recruitments are really up almost 30%. That reflects, I think, increasing exits of people who are both leaving for other career opportunities and who are retiring. We've got a great internship program. We have about 25 interns each year. We have rolled out a special training program, so we've got 74 sessions year to date of instructor-led training plus Skillsoft, which is an e-learning platform. And we've rolled out the new ethics policy. So initiatives for this new fiscal year, we really want to focus on recruiting and reduce our cycle times citywide. The recruiting has taken us over 100 days on average. That's this last month. We want to get it down to 80 days from start to finish.
Excuse me, but just recruiting in general, Kathy?
Yes. And we've done some benchmarking for other cities. For some hard-to-fill positions, it's not unusual to take quite a few months to fill, but on average, we're a little bit high. We do have a very extensive recruiting platform with several sets of interviews and an extensive background search. We've got this new department structure to enhance our customer service and our transactional excellence. So I've divided up people who do the SAP and the CalPERS and the benefit transactions into a separate team with a dedicated manager, and people who do the customer service, because we had 4 different employees making data entries, but they were also answering phones and answering employees. So now we've got some dedicated transactional excellence group working, and that's actually done really well just in the first 2 months of implementation. We're going to work a lot on succession planning because we know there will be more retirements and voluntary exits. We want people to have individual development plans, training plans. We plan on conducting a citywide risk assessment. My assistant director, Sandra Blanche, also serves as our risk manager. We'll be doing that. And we want to create a streamlined benefits and SAP interface using our consultant. So that's a little bit about what we're planning on doing, and I'll take any questions about the budget.
Good. Any questions or comments from the council?
Oh, just briefly. What do you do? What's the contract services that you have a $58,000 increase, and what do you currently do your contract services on? I guess you spend roughly $500,000 on it.
Yeah, let me pull it up for you.
We'll take a look at that.
So if I may add a few things. So one thing which gets budgeted out of the HR department is labor relations contracting. So obviously for the advisor, which you see in closed session, and which guides us in our effort. The other thing which you do see is, if you look at page 257, on the top page, we reduce contract services by $156,000 for data analytics, and we're adding $240,000 of similar work back into the budget. So it's a one-time out and a one-time back in, and that's the main difference of the delta you're seeing.
That's the 56.
That's the 56.
Got it. Okay, that's really helpful.
Sure.
Yeah. So headcount's flat, but headcount's flat, but salary and benefits is up 7.5% to 8%. So what's in that?
So what's in the salary and benefits is increase in base salary. So all of my staff are members of the management and confidential group who receive both merit increases and the 2%, and then they'll receive 2.5%, as the whole management group does. And you can see there's an increase in the cost of pension and the retiree medical, just as the citywide costs have gone up.
The salary's about the same now.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, salary half at 7.5%.
Salary 7.5%.
The other thing, Councilman Philsop, what you have from one fiscal year to the next is in fiscal 2015, they actually identified quite a few vacancies. We budgeted at a certain level for this time. Once we fill the positions, depending what the marketplace dictates, we may hire people higher than we budgeted.
Yeah.
And that's a reflection you see in 2016 as well.
Okay.
Can I just make that as just a general point, just so we're clear, because we're going to see that? We actually have a wide range in our pay scales for particularly management professional. It's about a 40% range. And so we budget, if there are vacancies and that sort of thing, or we had a new position, we budget at the midpoint. Obviously, if we brought somebody in at 10% over the midpoint, obviously we don't get built-in 10% costs.
Okay, so this also reflects sort of the anticipated somebody leaves and somebody more expensive gets hired into that place.
Yes, but what we do is we only budget the midpoint if they're actually at the midpoint or it's a vacant position. Otherwise, we budget the actual salary for that year for those people. So usually, if we're going to see something above that baseline built-in increase, that for the most part is going to be driven by the fact that we're having some change in turnover, and we're having some people who are coming in overall as a net above the midpoint.
That's correct. It's one of the reasons in this department for the change.
Question scattered through the pages are things that I just read the part of on page 251 is liability insurance increase of $1 million. On page 255 is a 280% increase in workers' comp. On page 261 there's a $1 million increase in general expense. Bottom of the page is $1.1 million on general liability insurance claims. And on page 64, there's an increase of about $1 million between 2013 and 2015 in claims filed. Whole pattern here of what, between $1 million, $1.5 million.
So I can speak to the council member. So what we have here is what we just touched on previously. We have internal service funds, such as for general liability or workers' compensation, where we budget the actual claims costs, and then we charge towards those funds. That's what you see in HR. So it's really a conversation about citywide workers' compensation costs have increased and general liability as well. And the reason why the budget has increased is we changed the budgeting methodology again. We're refining it. So what we get annually from an actuary is what we should be budgeting at a 90% chance claim for workers' compensation general liability. And that's what we did for those two funds. And that's why you see the drastic increase. So as we continue with the budgeting methodology, and we'll see how the experience is, we'll see a stabilization over the years.
So in fine-tuning, there's never a smaller number.
Well, it depends. So I can tell you why it was a smaller number. We fine-tuned, we haven't seen public safety yet, but you see the fire department's budgeted salaries and benefits actually decreasing because we fine-tuned that methodology. So it goes the other way as well.
Okay, so this is really setting up a potential reserve for the flow of future claims.
That's
It's
correct.
not an increase in claims.
It's budgeted, and if there's leftover funds, it will increase this reserve level for these funds. That's correct.
Okay. Okay, any further
I just
questions?
have two quick questions. So I'm going to address this, probably applies to everyone, but we give, what do we call it, merit raises? And we have a pool of funds for that?
Yes.
Is that spread out in each department head's budget for the coming year, or where does that money come from? And where would I find that in your budget?
So the way we build merit increases this year for management professional staff is as follows. First, the average merit increase happen between 0% and 3%. Okay? So we did an actual analysis, and we realized, and this was Paul Harper who sits behind me, he did that work. So he realized that of all the management professional staff, if we were to give everybody, let's say, a 2%, we actually don't need a 2%, we need a 1.5% to grant everybody the midpoint in merit increases. And the reason is because you have vacancies, you don't give merits for those. you have a first-year employee who doesn't get a merit increase. So what you'll see, the way we built the managed professional staff salary, we took the current payload down census of late February. We added to 2.5% for salaries as approved by the council effective July 1, and an average 1.5% increase for merit, which will be distributed per the city manager's review.
So I guess I'm going to want, at some point, tonight's not the night to do it, but I wanted to give you a heads up. I'm going to want an understanding of what that means distributed per the city manager's review. My understanding is each department head gets to pretty much make those decisions, and maybe that's changed. I want to understand if there's basically a curve which says, in your department you can't give everybody a 3% increase and somebody else can give everybody, it gives a 1% because they just happen to be a tougher department head. I want to understand how this works before I vote for it, and I want to know exactly what the metrics are behind it.
We'll make a note.
Okay, so I'm just saying tonight's not the night because I didn't want to blindside, but I want to get that on the table as something I want to understand.
I'm not going to go into it, but to answer your question, we do have a process.
Good, and I just want to understand it. So there was that question, and then what was the other question I had for you? There was another question. Oh, maybe it wasn't important. Oh, I know what it was. It was the question that Eric asked of Molly. What is the average salary increase been in your department?
So the average salary increase has been around the 2% level. But I would like to respond to your question, actually. It's not entirely up to the director to say how the merit increases are going to be distributed. We have a review with the city manager and with the CFO, and we look at each department. The director comes in and sort of defends their performance ratings and what they want. So it's not a forced curve. There's not a forced ranking, but there is a conversation about, gosh, is everybody always above average, or talking about different employees. So I think we have a pretty good methodology, and we can talk more about
I just wanted to understand it. It might be perfectly fine, and I might be all good with it. I just wanted to make sure, because I know we've had discussions about how that's evolving.
So if it's 2%, then where's the other 5.5%? Is that in the, I don't know. Right, because the average increase is 7.5, takes you on flat. Theirs is 2%, so.
Sure.
So
Well,
did it go to the Parks and Rec department, or?
there have been changes in the incumbents who are in some other jobs. So we've had some recruiting, we've had some people leave, and when you hire new people, sometimes they're hired at a different salary level.
And that accounts for 5%?
No, it does not. So that's another piece which is missing. So the management professional compensation plan is approved by the council.
Yep.
Authorizes an increase of 2.5% effective July 1.
Yep.
And then you have a pay for performance, a merit increase, which will be the 1.5% to 2% on top of that.
So that's on top of the 2%?
Your microphone on, please.
On top of, no, 2.5% is the general salary increase.
Yeah.
Then you have a pay for performance increase, a merit increase of, let's say, we budgeted 1.5, that gets you to 5%, and the rest is really the delta we talked about the vacancies versus filled staff.
Okay. So,
Sorry, can you turn your microphone on? Thank you.
I'm sorry to be slow. I'm still not grokking this completely.
Grokking?
You're cracking from last night.
That's a technical term.
Stranger
So you got the 2.5%. You got the 2.5%. You got the 2.5%, and the 1.5 on top of that takes you to 4.
Correct.
Right, and then you've got a couple more based on sort of what you've budgeted in case sort of moving around in midpoints and so forth. How does that relate to the average 2%?
That is past data. I think what Kathy talks about, what she has given in the past, not what we'll give in the future.
Oh, I see. So what's the projection for next year? It's 2.5.
It's budgeted for 1.5%, but it could be on the average of 2%.
Right.
Because we budget on every position that increased to make it simple. Because we don't know who's going to get the merit. The average increase budgeted is 1.5%, but it includes a vacant position too.
Yeah.
It's budgeted for that across the board, which then translate it's approximately 2% average Floyd.
I understand, I don't mean to pick on HR, but I think we're going to see this on every single department that comes here. I just want to make sure we understand it.
And we do it consistently.
Right.
And I think to your point on the smaller departments, it really stands out.
Right.
Also, HR can probably explain it, because I didn't want to pick on, like, Rob on this.
Right. HR can actually understand.
One last thing, Rob. After I said no to your position, would you please mind explaining these increases?
He's taking it personally. Do we have
I'll move approval of HR's budget.
Yay. Second.
Question, are we including the employee benefit funds in our
The employee what?
benefit funds?
So there's the general liability fund, we're looking at the employee benefits funds.
No, I was just doing this one in particular. We haven't looked.
We're just doing operating budget, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do the HR budget by itself, and then the employee. Any further comments on that? A second.
I gave one.
Okay, good. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Okay, any comments on the employee benefits fund?
I gotta get that.
They show up on page 262, 464, and 460.
Oh, okay, so,
So you want to look at 262 first?
yeah, what are we looking, 259 to 261 first?
262.
Workers' compensation, workers'
So we'll talk a little bit about that.
So 262. All right.
Any further comments on workers' comp?
I don't want to pressure you, but Mr. Chairman, could you set an end time, like maybe 9 o'clock? I mean, that would be.
I told him I have to
3.5
leave at
We
9.
lose Liz at 9.
I have
And
homework.
just in general, I mean, we have 4 meetings this week, just in,
Yeah, sensitive.
right, but people have to start at 7:30 and 8 tomorrow morning.
It would be good if we could get through the retiree.
So I don't think we have, I don't have any questions on this stuff.
Okay, 464. General benefit funds, pretty straightforward question. 470, retiree health. Let's see, I do have a couple quick questions on that.
Retiree health.
Yes, on page 470, the middle paragraph states that 31% of the accrued liability occurs to current active employees and 69% is attributable to retirees. Not to current employees when they retire, but to people who have already retired.
Correct.
69% of what we're paying is for people who are not working.
Yeah, you may recall that John Bartel from Bartel and Associates came and spoke to you at the prior council about that issue. And a lot of it was, just to do it really quick here, the history. We weren't funding retiree medical for the future obligations for those that were going to retire into the future. We were only paying as you go for people in the current. And so this is the bill for that, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it does reiterate the point that Councilmember Sharp is making, is that when we hire people, we're also hiring a future liability.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to this without taking us too far here, what we are doing now is funding not only the current retirees, current employees, and a portion of the current employees, unfunded portion from prior years of service. Not the whole amount, but some amount of that.
Quick question, when we hire someone at 50, who maybe works for 5 to 10 years and then retires, are we assuming the bulk, to pay the bulk of the retirement fund?
No, it's based on a percentage. So you have to have 5 years in Palo Alto, and you have to have a minimum of 10 years to qualify. So let's say if somebody did that and they were till 60, they would get the 50% coverage.
You're talking about healthcare.
You're talking healthcare. You were talking pension. Did you say
Yeah.
pension?
Well, we're on retired medical.
Yeah, we're on the health benefit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So we would be paying for someone who came at 50 and retired 7, 8 years later.
They would be at the 50% formula, and then there'd be the cost sharing by the employer.
Up to 20 years, and at 20 years.
It's 100%.
Yeah.
But they don't get anything until they hit 10 years vesting. So somebody 50 would have to work till 60 unless they had
Yeah.
5 years in some
I'm
other
just
perk.
concerned with the statement that we had earlier, that many of these funds have been underfunded. So maybe they've worked 20 years already somewhere else and have been underfunded. When they come here and work for 5 years, then they get fully funded.
That was part of our problem that we had, that somebody could work in another PERS agency, come to Palo Alto, spend 1 day here. I mean, it didn't happen literally that way, but so the way the vesting system was, then if they retire in Palo Alto, then Palo Alto is on the hook for that retirement obligation, for retirement.
A question in general, as we're looking through this, especially at the retiree health benefits and so forth, and our own health benefits, or whomever has those health benefits, do you see the ACA beginning to really kick in somewhere or not? It looked as though I could see it earlier in the book, but I'm not sure that's really true. And why don't you not answer it
Yeah,
tonight?
why don't we write?
But be thinking about that, because it's one of the most important aspects of how we keep healthcare costs down. And I hope we are able to take advantage of it in some way or other. I realize it's basically just kicked in fully in 2014. But I'd like some more information on, has that really made a difference? You know, we're about to head an election where this will be a huge discussion, and some more data from us I think would be helpful.
We'll get that for you.
Yeah, I think tonight we're just looking at the tables that are presented, which are straightforward, but the issue will come up with each department when we talk about new staff.
Yes, and then I think from my opening remarks, it's also on your to-do to us to come back and for us to have a discussion, a further in-depth discussion about retirement, medical, and pension as well.
That's in September, October.
Correct.
And we have to vote a budget.
Yeah, and what we're asking for you to do in the budget is to approve making the annual required contribution for the active employee, the currently retired, in some slight amount into the past services. So it's staying in line with what you approved as a council before in terms of funding retired medical on an annual basis. So that, from a policy perspective, everything's the same. Nothing's changed.
So you're actually asking us to tentatively approve that payment.
Right. Correct.
Which would be in keeping with already previously directed council policy.
Correct.
Council directed evaluation.
No, the council actually made a decision, I think, because of fund that.
Right. You're right. We updated the valuation and gave you the newer amounts. You made some changes to some of the assumptions that you may recall.
And then I thought we said, let's have a look at this.
Right, but you approved.
Actually, look at it.
You approved the annual required contribution amount, but
For
said let's look at it.
2015.
Well, at that point, Mr. Bartel gave you the future contributions as well, and said, here's the projected growth of our contribution.
Okay.
So we're using his numbers.
Anyone?
So the only thing I'd say is I'm willing to approve this tentatively. We may want to come back to some of this. You know, I feel a little bit like we're being railroaded to finish this meeting, and I actually resent it a little bit. So I think we have to have a discussion regarding what the timeline for the next meetings are and when we should start. I would suggest that we start earlier when we do it. And I actually was wondering, you know, one of the things that bothers me is what you said is you have all your staff here and it's late and that kind of stuff. You know, I think we should do these meetings much earlier in the day. I'd like to start this meeting at 3 o'clock, and that way your staff could work and come down, and it wouldn't be as they're needed. And so for a lot of these meetings,
all of you,
I mean, I'm willing to start earlier even than that, but I would like to, just run that by you as the city manager and say, it would be so much easier on everybody.
So I like that idea. Look, I'm not trying to railroad you into making even a decision. I'd rather you postpone this, you know what I mean, but still end by 9. That's 3.5 hours here.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I think that there's a lot of value to this idea of being able to start at 3, even for the ability to pull people down as needed. It's
So
helpful.
what about a motion to continue this item?
That would be good.
Okay.
And then we can continue the rest of the agenda, finish at 9, and then we can talk about next meeting and
Yep.
see if there's time.
So I think we're continuing retiring health and non-departmental too, just so we're clear
Yeah.
on
Yes.
on the liability.
So, yeah, let's do that.
General liability, sorry.
Okay.
So all 3 of them?
Yes.
Correct.
So we're continuing all 3.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay, so we
you.
need
Thank
a
you.
motion on that.
I'm sorry, I didn't
So
hear which
moved.
we're continuing.
I'll move it.
Well, that's 3, 5, 6, 7.
And may I make another suggestion? Why doesn't the chair and Palo and Walter just work with you on when this sequences and in the next meeting
Turn the microphone off,
offline with
please.
the folks?
I'll
Okay.
second that if you need a second.
Okay. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
That brings us, I guess, to the next.
I was going to give you the agenda copies updated.
All right.
These have
Here comes more.
suggested timeline.
Thanks.
We could work on the starting time offline, like the city manager suggested, but the key thing is to let us know if there's a meeting that you cannot make, to remind the committee we must have 3 of you to have a quorum. And so that's why it's important for us to ensure that we know if we can make a meeting, then we'll make sure that we have a quorum.
Well, this while you were out, we talked a little bit about starting as early as 3 o'clock.
And I am not coming at 3 o'clock.
What time?
5 is the earliest. I haven't, there's another life out there, I'm sorry to say.
Wouldn't you rather spend that life during the day than during the evening?
I really, no, I don't. I'm in the city most of tomorrow. I'm doing something completely different. So I think we could be a bit more expeditious.
So I actually think that we should.
Should what?
We should start earlier. I think that it doesn't really work to have all these people hanging around.
What do
here.
you want, do you want to start at 3 and finish when?
Well, I would be happy to finish at 8, frankly, or 7:30, as opposed to where we're pending on this stuff. I actually would prefer if we just did this during the day, frankly. That way we wouldn't have all these people coming down and sitting on.
Why don't you do this Tuesday and Thursday throughout May?
No, I actually would prefer to have one meeting, frankly, where we don't have 2 meetings a day. If I had my brothers, I'd start this meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they bring staff down as they need to, and we would finish once a week as opposed to 2 meetings for, 4 or 5 hours. I think that would be the easiest on staff.
It actually is not a bad idea, but
Yeah.
you're going to have to find a day when we're all free.
Right. Well, could we take that as a suggestion and see
Yeah,
what
why
we
don't
could
you-
do,
why
even
don't you
looking
take
at tomorrow?
that?
I think it's a great idea. It would be better for us to work 12 hours. I mean, I hate to say it, or whatever it is, with people coming and going. You get more comparison between what you're seeing in the pattern of stuff.
Yeah, there was not a lot of public participation, so probably needs some flexibility.
Just let me get, on Thursday, we are starting at 5:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, since I have down the California Avenue streetscape opening and so forth is that day, am I correct? Or am I wrong?
Yeah. But next week, we have 2 meetings scheduled, 12 and 14.
Yes, Cal Avenue opening is Thursday, 2:30 or 3 p.m. this week.
So,
Well, you know what, then on Tuesday the 12th, if we start at 3, I'm at BTA.
okay, we're at VTA to what time?
It should be done by, my plan was to be back here between 5:30
I'm
and
going to leave the schedule with you guys.
What time does VTA start?
4. It's
So why don't we started at 10 and we finished at,
Suzanne.
Well, let me take a look at the rest of the day.
We have sent out
This is Tuesday the 12th?
yeah.
change
We'd be
Got a
finished.
meeting at 11, at 12:30, and one at 4.
Can you change those meetings or not? I mean, then we'd be done with it.
What about the,
Greg, I would love to. I am not free those days. I hope we're not on the air, are we?
still recording?
Can we go off?
No, this is part of the meeting.
Me yelling at Greg?
Tuesday
Oh, what's
or
new?
Thursday, either one of those days.
So I actually can't do Thursday. I won't be here by Thursday.
Oh.
I can't do it.
It's not, I hope my mic is off. It is not that easy to just willy-nilly say, well, now have it 10 o'clock from 3 to 3 in the afternoon. I think had we thought about it in February, it might be a great idea.
Well, okay. I mean, it's stressful on staff. I think it's stressful on staff, and it's questionable. It is what it is.
Can we move it to 5?
On which day?
On Tuesday.
You can move it to 5. I won't be here.
Oh, why? You said you'd get back from VT at 4:30?
Well, I can try. It's a joint advisory meeting. It's scheduled from 3 to 5. What I said is I try to be back here by 5:30 to 6. You could start without me.
We could. I'm fine with that.
There'll be 3 of you. I don't have any. I will not be hurt if you start without me.
So do you mind if we start at 3 without me?
Well, if you think you don't need a third one on your finance, a fourth on your finance committee, it's
Yeah, I
fine.
think if
I
you're
think-
taking one of the days off, it's good to
You
have.
got me to bite on that one, didn't you? I shouldn't have bit. I think we should start on a Monday morning and finish up whenever we get done.
I'm good with that.
We'll
You want
just
to do
go through
that?
the whole thing.
Let's do that.
Right, the whole budget.
I'm good with that. Do you have a Monday you're available?
No, I need it to you.
I do. No, I will clear my calendar and get it done.
I think some year it might be a good idea. So, if you're at all interested at the county, that is what we did. Greg, we did what you're talking
Well,
about.
I think that's what makes the most sense.
But we had budget hearings at night
So,
so public could come.
Liz, just so you're clear on this, these meetings will not end at 9. They are likely to continue and go to 10. And, I do not believe we will get through this.
Isn't that up to us?
Well, it is, but, it depends on what you want.
I think this is very attendee dependent.
Well, it does, but it depends on what you view the budget. And I view this as one of the more important things we do as a council. And I view that I don't see us finishing at 8:30, given how we do this.
I think we should close the meeting. I think we've gone as far as we
I
can.
think so. I think so.
Therefore, the meeting is finished. Thank you.